Chapter 496. The attack of the tribulation sword was mixed with the unparalleled sharpness of the tribulation sword in the world. So its might was extremely formidable, especially since the tribulation sword had swallowed so many exotic metals and medicinal herbs during this period of time. So its might had become even more formidable than before. However, the second elder was a third-grade emperor-level expert. So he was a grade higher than Chu Yang. The quality of his sword was far inferior to Chu Yang's. However, his profound spiritual power wasn't to be trifled with either. The two sword lights collided with each other like two meteors. There was a loud bang, and the brilliant sword lights exploded all over the sky. The entire chill wind forest fiercely trembled at this moment. The cement of the swamp fiercely jumped up with a loud bang, and splashed up to a height of more than 100 feet. Dong Wuxiang, Luo Kedi and GMO, who were the closest to the impact, let out a miserable groan at the same time. They were sent flying by the huge impact, and fell to the ground with a bang. Chu Yang and the second elder screamed at the same time. Their bodies were sent flying backwards at the same time. Blood arrows had been spurted out from different parts of their bodies. Both of them had been seriously injured by this blow. Chu Yang's chest and shoulders had been hit by the setting sail watermark, his lower abdomen and his shoulders. The second elder's chest and shoulders had also been hit by the setting sail watermark, and his legs and arms had also been hit by the setting sail watermark. Chu Yang's body was still in midair. He had already prepared an incomplete version of the heavy pill, and had stuffed it into his mouth. Chu Yang had consumed 2 incomplete versions of the heavy pill in this insignificant battle that had lasted less than a breath's time. This clearly showed how tragic this battle was. One could imagine that Chu Yang would have died at least once if he didn't have the heavy pill. Chu Yang had the heavy pill, but the second elder didn't have such a godly item. The intensity of this attack had completely dispersed the power of the domain on the second elder's body, and the spiritual energy cover had disappeared without a trace. Even an emperor-level expert would consume a lot of his true elemental energy every time he used such a life-saving method. So, how could he dare to use the domain again in such a fierce battle? The body of the second elder hadn't even landed on the ground when Gu Duxing, who had just retreated to make preparations, had already fused with his sword. The sword light soared high into the sky and shot towards the body of the second elder. The second elder felt a sense of crisis, so he roared and fiercely circulated the spirit energy in his entire body. Suddenly, several wounds on his body started to spurt out blood, but he managed to hang on to his last breath. He circulated his spirit energy, and once again collided with Gu Duxing in midair. This was a desperate attack from a third-grade sword king. The second elder did his best to counterattack, and the two of them fiercely collided. At the same time, they screamed and screamed. Gu Duxing clenched his teeth and flew backwards in the air without feeling anything. Blood spurted out from 3 places on his body and filled the air. He had been injured by the second elder's fists and fingers. 7 of his ribs had been broken. His entire chest had almost caved in, but the front half of the black dragon longsword in his hand was dripping with blood. His sword had already pierced deeply into second elder's right chest, and he was forced back by the other party's counterattack. Second elder drifted backwards again. He was already heavily injured. At this moment, Dong Wuxiang roared like a hungry wolf. He became one with his saber and rushed over. GMO and Luo Kedi also became one with their swords. They followed behind Dong Wuxiang and attacked the second elder with all their might. The attacking style of these 3 people was the same as Gu Duxing's a moment ago. They were all risking their lives. They were putting their entire strength, heart, soul, and life into this attack. The second elder won't die. We will die. This is a clear thought. Therefore, we must take advantage of his illness to take his life. Chu Yang shouted from afar. He turned over and jumped up. His calamity sword flashed, and he once again used, "What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world?" He flew high up in the air with his sword. The second elder's heart was filled with intense regret. I should have retreated and escaped when I discovered the ambush. Even if you beat me to death, I wouldn't have thought that these 5 youngsters would be so abnormal. I'm a third-grade emperor-level expert. a third-grade emperor-level expert. I'm facing the danger of losing my life. However, he didn't have time to regret. Dong Wuxiang had already become one with his saber. The second elder roared in despair. He once again gathered the remaining strength of his body and crazily collided with Dong Wuxiang. Dong Wuxiang shouted. The heavy black saber flew out of his hand and spun in the air. However, this third-grade saber king had risked his life to attack. But this had made the second elder's situation even worse. He fiercely spouted out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't suppress the injuries in his body as he spouted out this mouthful of blood. He spouted out several mouthfuls of blood in succession. His eyes had already turned somewhat dim. His left hand drooped down softly. It had been smashed to pieces by the heavy black saber. At this moment, GMO and Luo Kudi combined their swords and rushed over with a loud roar. The second elder screamed. He suddenly attacked with his remaining right hand. Countless poisonous fog and black gas suddenly emerged from his body. This was his last life-saving trick, igniting the starting voyage water seal to burn his own poison and fight for a chance to escape. The poison that had been cultivated in the starting voyage water seal for over 100 years would be completely destroyed after it was burned. It wouldn't be able to be used again. This was something that could only be used at the last moment. The second elder wouldn't have done this if he hadn't been forced to the point where he was at the end of his rope. However, GMO and Luo Kudi weren't afraid at all. They forcibly broke through the poisonous fog and rushed in. You aren't afraid of poison? The second elder screamed in despair. Two bang, bang. Sounds were heard as the two men and their swords collided with his body. The second elder screamed. Blood splashed out from his body like a bloody gourd. There were at least 100 wounds on his body, and his flesh was torn apart at the same time. Crack, crack. Sounds were heard from his chest. It was unknown how many bones had been broken. However, he was still able to escape. There was a big tree behind him. He stamped his feet and used the last of his strength to rush up. He would have been able to fly out as long as he had stamped on the tree trunk. However, it was too late. A brilliant sword light rushed over like a meteor and cut off all the second elder's hopes. Chuyang, Calamity Sword. What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? Chuyang burst open a big bloody hole in the second elder's chest with a bang sound. Then he rushed out of his body. The light in the second elder's eyes dimmed. He stood powerlessly on the top of the tree. Then he suddenly let out a long sigh. His head lowered and rolled down from his neck with a rumbling sound. Then his fragmented body fell down from the tree. It fell halfway and scattered into a pile of minced meat. Chuyang and the others had smeared the poison on their swords when they fell on the ground. This pile of minced meat instantly turned into black water and completely decayed. Chuyang whistled as he came back on his flying sword. He arrived beside the unconscious Gu Duxing and fed him an incomplete version of the heavy pill. Then, he jumped up without looking. He whistled and rushed towards the other king-level experts with GMO and Luo Kudi. The outcome had been decided. All the experts of the O clan had been annihilated. Not a single one of them had escaped. Everyone had been thinking about this battle for a long time. That was because this was a battle of life and death, in the truest sense of the word. Even if they had been a little bit negligent, or even a little bit uncooperative, then, they would have been the ones lying here at this moment. Chapter 497. This fight had lasted for less than a quarter of an hour. No, it wasn't even 1/3 of a quarter of an hour. However, this was the most dangerous fight that Chuyang and his brothers had faced since their debut. In fact, each of them had exhausted all of their strength in this fight. Everyone had been circling around the door of death countless times. But fortunately we won. We won. Shua Duxing sat up from the ground. His bloodstained face exposed a brilliant smile. Won. Dong Wuxiang, Luo Kudi, and the others felt as if they were dreaming. They still couldn't believe these words. This fight had been a sneak attack and a plot. But they had been outnumbered after all. Moreover, the two leaders of the opposite party were genuine emperor-level experts. They felt a dull pain in their chests. They had been injured by the emperor-level experts. They still had a lingering fear in their hearts. But the enemy had already been annihilated. It was a dreamlike and unreal scene. Dong Wuxiang's heavy black saber was inserted straight into the ground. It was emitting a cold and majestic radiance. The people of the O clan had slowly turned into a puddle of blood. They were rotting in this gloomy chill wind forest. Shua Duxing and the others slowly stood up. They looked at the human tragedy that they had created with their own hands. They were collectively silent. Only their throats were gasping for breath. This is only the beginning. More and more powerhouses will fall because they have offended us in the future. Chu Yang insipidly said after they had calmed down a little. We killed 5 Emperor-level experts today. But we also died. We brothers would have died 10 times if we hadn't plotted against them. Chu Yang stood up. His sharp vision swept over the faces of his brothers. He slowly extended his hand and slowly clenched it into a fist. His eyes were fixed on his fist. He slowly said in a low and deep voice, "But we will make such Emperor-level experts fall under our hands one day, and we can destroy them with a flip of our hand." He had spoken the last few words very slowly, but they were brimming with strong self-confidence. The brothers looked at Chu Yang's clenched fist and slowly stretched it. Then he fiercely flipped it over and pressed it down. They couldn't help but feel their hearts throbbing violently. It seemed as if this palm had crushed an Emperor-level expert into fine powder. It's that easy. Chu Yang turned around and smiled. His snow-white teeth sparkled in the dense fog. Everyone looked at him quietly. Their eyes were shining, but they did not say a word. After a long time, Shua Duxing slowly turned his head. He looked at the king-level expert of the Shua clan and said, "I wish to follow Big Brother Chu and join the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. Everyone, are you willing to come along?" The two men looked at each other. Then the leader of the king-level experts, Shua Qingfeng, took a step forward and solemnly said, "We brothers are not proficient in our studies. So, it will be difficult for us to make even an inch of progress in our lives. It's rare for the young master to have such great ambitions. We brothers are willing to help the young master at all costs to fulfill his wish. At your beck and call, at your beck and call." He smiled bleakly as he looked at his brother's corpse lying in a pool of blood. He said in a low voice, "The pot never breaks when it leaves the well. A general can't avoid dying in battle. We, the people of Jianghu, know that every step we take will lead to death. The only thing we can't let go of is the precarious situation of our Shua clan. If the young master can reach the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, then, even if you don't represent the Shua clan, there will still be one person surnamed Shua in the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. We brothers will have no regrets even if we die." Shua Duxing took a deep breath. He felt that the rims of his eyes were somewhat hot as he said, "I'm the Shua clan's young master. So, I'm naturally a member of the Shua clan. If there is such a person, then the Heavenly Armament Pavilion will have the name of my Shua clan." Everyone knelt down in an orderly manner. Their old tears streamed down their faces. "We're willing to follow the young master and join the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. We'll have no regrets even if we have to die 10,000 times." Shua Duxing nodded and said, "The Heavenly Armament Pavilion is still weak at the moment. It's inappropriate to reveal our secrets and identities this," Shua Qingfeng solemnly said. "This is natural. Everything has its own rules and regulations. It's not the first day that we've come to Jianghu, so we naturally understand. No matter what, we've been mingling in the 3 heavens for more than half of our lives. So we're confident that we know more than the young clan lords. We can pay attention to many things in the future." Shua Duxing nodded with gratification. A trace of a smile appeared on his cold face. He had used some means to drive away those 3 people who had an unstable position. So, he had left behind some loyal and reliable people to form the first team of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. He would have a great chance of success if he had this group of Jianghu veterans with him in the future. Everyone discussed for a while. Then they buried the dead king-level expert. Then they continued to move forward without stopping. "We'll come back to settle this account with the O clan sooner or later." Chu Yang gazed in the direction of the O clan before he left. He slowly said after a long time, "The O clan won't exist in the next 3 heavens." He turned around and left. He didn't even look back on the way. He was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. The O clan had schemed against him. and had caused the tragic death of one of his men. His brothers had also been seriously injured. So, how could Chu Yang not remember this account in his heart? Shuo Duxing remained silent in front of the new grave for a long time. His complexion was like iron, and his eyes were expressionless. He suddenly grabbed a handful of soil from the grave before he left. Then he stuffed it into his mouth and swallowed it. He knelt down and heavily kowtowed 3 times. Then he got up and strode away. He didn't look back. This enmity is mine. I'll settle this debt for you. I won't say anything. But you'll know my intentions if your spirit is still there. I'll return to the Chill Wind Forest after I've killed the O Clan's people. And I'll tell you, so that you can rest in peace. Shuo Duxing didn't say these words out loud. In fact, he didn't say a single word. However, he had made an ironclad vow in his heart. He left in large strides. His black cloak fluttered in the wind, and he left behind a straight and sword-like silhouette in the Chill Wind Forest. Enmity is in the heart, but kindness is in the heart. Enmity must be repaid with one's own hands. Kindness must be repaid 10,000 times over. This was Shuo Duxing's principle. The Chill Wind Forest was once again shrouded in a dense fog after everyone had left. It seemed as if the remnant souls of the new arrivals were howling and crying. But it also seemed as if the heroic souls of the Shuo clan were smiling and waving their hands to bid farewell. 3 days later, at the O clan, the teacup in the hand of the clan lord, O Chengwu, fell to the ground with a bang and shattered into pieces. The complexions of the great elder and the others were gloomy, as if they wanted to eat someone alive. O Duzhao's complexion was deathly pale. He opened his mouth, but his lips were trembling. But he couldn't utter a single word. This king-level expert had come to report the completion of his mission while carrying 3 heads. However, the others had chased them into the Chill Wind Forest and hadn't returned. The informants in the Chill Wind Forest had reported back. King of Hell Chu and his group of 12 people had passed through the forest safe and sound. Everyone was in high spirits, and a few of them were injured. The informants who had gone to the Chill Wind Forest had reported back. Looking at the traces left behind in the Chill Wind Forest, it seemed that there had been a battle between experts. Judging from the traces left behind at the scene, the experts who had fought with each other were at the Emperor level. The battlefield had been extremely tragic. The trees in the vicinity of several thousand feet had been destroyed. The battle had been fought, and the situation had been so tragic. King of Hell Chu and his group were safe and sound. Moreover, the second elder and his group hadn't returned. So, even a fool could guess what had happened. The second elder and his group had been annihilated. Moreover, their corpses had been destroyed without leaving any trace behind. They had lost 5 Emperor-level experts and 24 King-level experts. This was a huge blow to the O clan. It was as if the sky had collapsed. There were only 5 Emperor-level experts in total. There were more than 50 King-level experts. But the remaining 20 or so were experts who had been hired for external aid. As for the true hardcore experts of the clan, there were only 30 of them. These people were the most reliable. So, the O clan wasn't afraid that the information would leak out. Therefore, they had been dispatched to carry out this mission. But they hadn't expected 24 of them had died. That king-level expert had luckily returned because he hadn't gone with them. Moreover, he had come out of the Chill Wind Forest uninjured. If he had gone with them, perhaps he would have died in vain. The O clan was in a gloomy and miserable state. O Chengwu was regretting his decision to the bone. Had I known that King of Hell Chu's group was so powerful, how could I have thought of plotting against them? The clan had clearly decided to take advantage of this opportunity to mend relations with the 4 big clans before King of Hell Chu's arrival. This was a powerful opportunity that had delivered itself to our doorstep. But this opportunity has been ruined because of everyone's greed. Moreover, we have lost the lives of 5 Emperor-level experts and 24 King-level experts. Moreover, we have made powerful enemies. Why do we have to do this? It seems that King of Hell Chu's group is hiding some super experts. The great elder's chest was heaving up and down violently. His voice was trembling, but he forced himself to remain calm as he analyzed. Moreover, these guys haven't suffered any casualties under our siege. This shows that these little guys have boundless prospects in the future. Moreover, they have the support of the 4 big clans behind them. They haven't received the mission yet. It seems that they are taking revenge on us, because they don't have enough strength. It seems that this enmity has been sown. They will come sooner or later. The great elder said in a heavy voice. Therefore we can't sit still and wait for death. Everything will be over in case we are suppressed by the army of the 4 big clans. I will look for them to take revenge even if they don't come. How can I let them off so easily? Du Xiao clenched his teeth. The blue veins on his temples were throbbing. No matter what, a clan must first consider the strategy of self-preservation. Then, we must think about the strategy of destroying the enemy. Du Xiao, you still need to temper yourself. You must take revenge. But there are many more things that are more important than revenge. There is no other way out of a moment of hot-bloodedness, except for destruction. The great elder coldly glanced at Du Xiao and said, the most important thing for us at present isn't revenge. It's self-preservation. What's the use of killing all of them if the O clan is gone? Du Xiao's face turned red as he replied, yes, great elder's teachings are correct. He drew back 2 steps, and said in his heart, these people are your brothers. Wouldn't you scold me for being heartless if I didn't show some anger? Chapter 498. At present we can only form an alliance. The great elder said in a heavy voice. Our current enemies are King of Hell Chu, Shuo clan, Ji clan, Luo clan, and Dong clan because of this matter. In addition, there are 2 of their staunch allies, Mo clan and Xie clan. The great elder raised his fingers and coldly said, but Gu clan is the weakest. Mo clan has just suffered a great change, so its strength can't be considered as strong. Ji clan is the same. We can't rely on them, but we can't pull them down. Only Luo clan, Dong clan, and Xie clan are comparable in strength to our O clan. He heaved a long sigh and sadly said, our clan has just lost so many experts, so we can't be compared with these 3 clans. This old man made a mistake in his calculation. He paused, and didn't speak for a long time. Then, he continued with a sorrowful look on his face. Let's analyze the situation of the enemy and our own clans. Ji clan and Gao clan already have a reconcilable enmity. Mo clan and Black Devil clan are also irreconcilable. Dong clan and Tian clan are also constantly fighting. Shuo clan and Tu clan have deep enmity. There's also the Zhao clan. They've been suppressed by the Luo clan for a long time. Meng Su, who's in a difficult situation now, is also a force to be reckoned with. As for the Xie clan, they've been at odds with the Li clan ever since Xie Dan Xiong rejected their marriage proposal. The great elder said in a profound manner, the enemy of our enemy is our friend. If we can get in touch with them, we will be able to. The power of the 8 great clans is not weak. The great elder was worthy of being called an experienced and astute Jianghu veteran. His calculations were very clear and orderly. Although they had suffered a great change, they hadn't lost their minds. Chung Wu's eyes lit up. Great elder is wise. Well, the enemy has faintly joined forces, and we need to start our operation now. We are a step behind in terms of time, but they have to deal with the spirit beasts this time. This is our time. The great elder frowned. But we need to be especially vigilant against the dark bamboo. I heard that Duke Yu of the dark bamboo has a good personal relationship with King of Hell Chu. I don't know how good this relationship is. Will it affect the dark bamboo's attack? If the dark bamboo attacks, we have no chance of winning. Chung Wu's complexion turned gloomy as he said, even if we contact the Ao clan and the Li clan to stand on our side, we can only be evenly matched. In fact, we might even be at a disadvantage. You're wrong. If bamboo were to interfere, the situation would become even more chaotic. This is because bamboo has conflicts with all of the other clans. There have been conflicts. The great elder snorted and said, as for the Ao clan, don't even think about it. The Ao clan won't get involved in this mess, unless we kill Ao Xian now, and shift the blame to these clans. Speaking up to this point, he suddenly stopped talking. His eyes were deep as he pondered. Chung Wu's eyes also lit up. In an instant, the hall fell silent. After a long while, Chung Wu stood up and said, there's no time to lose. I'll immediately arrange for the people of the great families. Bring some natural treasures, the great elder said gloomily. Now that we have a favor to ask of others, we have no choice but to spend money. Even if we keep those things, we'll just keep them. At the critical moment, we'll need to use them. Chengwu replied, all right. Then, he immediately arranged for Du Xiao to bring some people to get them. Then, he began to arrange the people on this side in a rush to prepare for the diplomatic mission. However, it didn't take long for Du Xiao to rush over. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat. His face was distorted beyond recognition. It seemed as if he had lost his mind. It's not good. What's the matter? Chengwu was startled. Have they already come knocking on our door? The great elder became even more dissatisfied. You need to be calm in the face of trouble. How can you be in such a panic? Du Xiao's face was covered in soybean-sized beads of sweat. He almost wanted to cry. Our hidden treasure house has been robbed. Our natural treasures are gone. What? The great elder fiercely stood up. His chair fell to the ground with a bang sound. However, he didn't care about it. His old eyes that were always hidden in his wrinkles suddenly opened wide like copper bells. Say that again? It's been robbed. It's really been robbed. Du Xiao's voice carried a sobbing tone. Not even a little bit. Chengwu fiercely drew back 3 steps. His complexion had turned as white as snow. Let's go and take a look. The great elder stood in the empty hidden treasure house not long after. He looked at the empty heavenly fragrance jade boxes. His eyes were lifeless. He didn't speak for a long time. He seemed as if he had lost his soul. Then, he suddenly spouted out a mouthful of blood after a long time. He then looked up to the sky. Oh God, is it possible that the heaven wants my clan to perish? Chengwu's entire body trembled. His vision was in a mess. He muttered, how can this be? The clan had collected these natural treasures in the past for the purpose of promoting their cultivation. However, many of them had become useless once they had reached a certain amount. Therefore, they had sealed them up. The clan had become more and more powerful, and they had resorted to all sorts of tricks and robberies. Therefore, they had collected more and more of these things. In the past, Chengwu had only thought that he could slowly cultivate and accumulate these good things, since he had so many of them. After all, these natural treasures could be used to make poisons when the clan's poison level had reached a new level, and these natural treasures could be used to supplement and stimulate the poison. This was the highest level of poison. Therefore, he had always managed them with great care. However, he hadn't expected that these natural treasures would be stolen at this critical juncture, when the clan needed them the most. There are still some residual things inside. A lot of them are just powders. And a lot of them are dried up elixirs, Du Xiao said in a daze. Chengwu suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He said, could it be that King of Hell Chu did it? Du Xiao shook his head. It shouldn't be. I've been inseparable from King of Hell Chu ever since he came here. He doesn't have any opportunity to do such a thing. It must be someone else. Investigate. Chengwu roared. The elixirs were gone. Moreover, the precious materials had been taken away by King of Hell Chu. The clan was a big clan, but it had fallen into an awkward situation where it didn't have any gifts to give. Upper 3 heavens, Chu Feiling's return to the Chu clan had caused a huge uproar. No one had expected that Chu Feiling would find the mysterious Yang Jade so quickly. Mr. Yu was greatly surprised when he received the mysterious Yang Jade. His white beard was blown straight, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Mysterious Yang Jade core? Where did you get this treasure? I got it by chance. It's pure luck. Chu Feiling smiled gently and elegantly. He didn't want to expose the existence of his little brother. Chu Feilong would have dealt with him to vent his anger if he had known about it. Your luck is very good. Mr. Yu looked at him with envy. This old man has been looking for it for more than 100 years. But I haven't even seen a single hair of this thing. Chu Feiling said. Mr. Yu, my father's injury won't be a problem now that I have this thing, right? There's absolutely no problem. Mr. Yu patted his chest and said, I've brought the mysterious Yang Jade core here. So I might as well smash my own reputation and become a beggar if I still can't heal Clan Lord Chu. Chu Feiling heaved a sigh of relief. He gratefully said, "Thank you, Mr. Yu. I've troubled you." Mr. Yu chuckled. "Big brother, I heard that you've returned? Have you found the mysterious young jade?" A voice was heard. It was full of concern. A man walked in with large strides as this voice sounded. He had a handsome face and a tall stature. He was dressed in a brocade robe. His hair wasn't messy. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, even when he was looking at people in a gentle manner. But this person's eyes were as deep as the sea. Moreover, his bearing was extraordinary. He stood like a deep pool and a high mountain. His every move was full of natural authority. He was the second son of the Chu clan, Chu Feilong. "I found it. Father's injury shouldn't be a problem." Chu Feiling looked at his second brother with a complicated look in his eyes. He then insipidly said, "That's great." Chu Feilong's spirit was suddenly lifted. He grabbed Chu Feiling's hand and said in a pleasantly surprised manner, "Big brother, we have to thank you for this trip." "Third brother, and I haven't been able to eat for the past few days. Alas, it's fortunate that big brother came back early. Otherwise, third brother would have been blaming himself even if I could have held on. I'm afraid that he wouldn't have been able to hold on." As he spoke, he sighed. "Third brother is like this. He's very thoughtful. I've told him a few times. This guy really gives me a headache." Chu Feiling swallowed his saliva, and his Adam's apple moved. He smiled and said, "Thanks to the two of you for taking care of us during my absence. Second brother, it's been hard on you." Chu Feilong was displeased. He said earnestly, "Big brother, what are you saying? We're blood-related brothers. We share the same mother. Besides, it's only right that Zhao Shua is our father. How can it be hard on me? Big brother, you've been running around, and this has made me feel uneasy. You must rest well for a few days and recuperate. Big brother, you're the pillar of our clan. If you collapse from exhaustion, we really don't know what to do." He spoke affectionately and laughed heartily. He held his big brother's hand affectionately. His eyes were full of sincerity. He stared at his big brother frankly. The rims of his eyes were a little red. It was evident that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Chu Feiling sighed sadly in his heart. He thought of the Saber Emperor, who chased after him in the lower three heavens. "Second brother, is it really you? I'm really willing to believe that the person in front of me is the real you." Mr. Yu looked at this scene and couldn't help but say enviously, "You brothers have such a good relationship. It's rare to see such brothers in other clans." Chu Feilong laughed and said sincerely, "Mr. Yu, you're praising me so much that I'm blushing. We share the same mother. If we don't have a good relationship, can we still be brothers? Big brother has always taken care of us since we were young. He's always shouldered everything for us. He's willing to work hard without complaint. If such a big brother isn't worthy of respect, then there's no big brother in the world who's worthy of respect." Mr. Yu nodded with gratification and said, "I'm going to treat Clan Master Chu's injuries. You brothers haven't seen each other for a long time. You should have a good chat." He walked in while sighing. Chapter 499. A figure flashed, and Chu Feiyin rushed in. "Big brother, you're back. I heard that you found the mysterious young jade." His hands trembled nervously as he stared at Chu Feiling. Chu Feiling nodded and smiled. "I found it." That's great, that's great." Chu Feiyin jumped up and realized that his second brother was also here. He hurriedly greeted him. "Second brother, you're here too." His voice was somewhat nervous. His second brother had always been very kind to him and had taken care of him meticulously, but he didn't know why. But he felt afraid every time he saw his second brother. He was far less affectionate than his big brother. Chu Feiyin didn't know what was going on. "Third brother, you can't change your impatient temper." Chu Feilong frowned. "You're a man with a family and a business, but you're still like a child. What has disappointed you with big brother's work? You're still asking." Chu Feilong reprimanded him, but pulled his younger brother over and carefully blew away the dust on his collar. He patted his younger brother's messy hair and was full of love, but he still rebuked him with a sullen face. "Be more careful in the future. Look at you, what have you become?" Chu Feiyin scratched his head and smiled mischievously. He was somewhat embarrassed. "Big brother is better. But second brother always treats me like a child. This is really annoying. But second brother's love for me is really indescribable. Chu Feiling looked on from one side and smiled. But he sighed painfully in his heart. Chu Feilong's performance was impeccable, and he had deceived everyone except for himself. But how could Chu Feiling's personal experience be deceived? He and his wife had been chased repeatedly, and their son had been missing for 18 years. 3 heavenly saber emperors had besieged them. Could it be that all of this is fake? Second brother, what do you want? The 3 brothers sat for a while. Then footsteps were heard from inside. Mr. Yu walked out quickly and smiled. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. Chu Feiling and Chu Feiyin stood up together and were overjoyed. A cold light flashed in Chu Feilong's eyes. Then, he also stood up in ecstasy and grabbed Mr. Yu's hand. Thank you, mister. Thank you, mister. Mister's great kindness to the Chu clan makes me shed tears of gratitude. I can't thank you enough. Please accept my bow. As he spoke, he actually fell to his knees with a plop and kowtowed repeatedly. His face was filled with tears of gratitude. His true feelings were revealed. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. Second Master Chu, you've really wronged me. Mr. Yu was very relieved. He hurriedly helped Chu Feilong up. An old man with a leopard head and round eyes walked out with a satisfied smile. He was the head of the Chu clan, Chu Xiongqing. The dark aura on his face had already been swept away, and his face was glowing red. It was obvious that his injuries had healed quite well. You're all here. Not bad. Felice, it's all thanks to you this time. Chu Xiongqing laughed. Father, it's good that you've recovered. It's only right for me to work hard. Chu Feiling said respectfully. Big brother, has sister-in-law returned? Chu Feiyin asked. She went to the lower 3 heavens, but I've already sent her a message. I think she'll be back in a few days. Chu Feiling said with a smile. Sister-in-law is alone. Don't let anything happen to her. Chu Feiyin said worriedly. Your sister-in-law went down with her master. She'll definitely be fine. Chu Feiling said meaningfully. Big brother, you're really thoughtful. Chu Feilong laughed. If Lord Lan is willing to take action, then there are only a few people in the entire heavens who can hurt sister-in-law. Big brother and sister-in-law are deeply in love with each other. You really love your wife very much. Ha ha ha. Except for Chu Feiling. Everyone laughed together. Chu Feiling only felt depressed, but he had to accompany them and laugh a few times. After a few days, young Ruolan finally returned to the Chu clan, but she came back alone. After she greeted the master, she was pulled back by Chu Feiling. Why did you come back so late? Chu Feiling was a little anxious. I went to do some things on the way, young Ruolan said. What's the matter? Something big. Chu Feiling's face was serious. I encountered Yi Ranmo leading 8 saber emperors in the lower 3 heavens. They attacked me with a formation on the 5th day of the lower 3 heavens. He started to take action again? Young Ruolan's complexion changed. He's really seizing every opportunity to deal with us. Are you okay? Young Ruolan heard this and realized that there was something fishy about this matter. I'm fine. Fortunately, I had my sworn younger brother. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to come back this time. Chu Feiling sighed. He couldn't help but reveal a warm smile on his face when he thought of Chu Yang. It wasn't because Chu Yang had given him so many gifts. It was because Chu Feiling felt a genuine affection for his sworn younger brother. Your sworn younger brother? Young Ruolan asked in amusement. When did you have another sworn younger brother? You can't rely on your own brothers. So you have another sworn younger brother? Haha, my sworn younger brother is very resourceful. Chu Feiling said mysteriously. Chu Feiling said mysteriously. Then he focused on observing the movements around him. I'll tell you this, but you mustn't tell anyone else. This mysterious young jade core was given to me by my sworn younger brother. Ah, your sworn younger brother is so generous? Young Ruolan asked in astonishment. This mysterious young jade core is the most precious treasure in the world. But he's willing to give it to someone else. This is nothing. My sworn younger brother has given me a lot of good things. Chu Feiling smiled and said. It's a pity that second brother is very popular at home. He's very close to everyone. So I can't tell him about this matter. Otherwise, it would have reached his ears, alas. How's your sworn younger brother's cultivation? Yang Ruolan tightly knitted her brows and said. You can't tell him if his strength is low. He has ruined Chu Feilong's plan. So Chu Feilong won't let him off. Yes, I have this concern. Chu Feiling nodded and said. My sworn younger brother's cultivation is only at the 2nd grade of Sword King. That's troublesome. But, won't Yi Ranimo tell you even if you don't tell him? Yang Ruolan worriedly said. He's still as dangerous as before. There's no harm in bringing your sworn younger brother here. We owe him a great debt of gratitude. Wouldn't our conscience be uneasy if we don't care about him? It's all right. Chu Feiling slightly smiled. Yi Ranimo has already died at the hands of my sworn younger brother. The Yi clan's saber emperors have also died with my sworn younger brother's help. None of them survived. That's good. Yang Ruolan heaved a sigh of relief. But then she suddenly became startled. She realized that something was extremely wrong. She suddenly raised her head and opened her eyes wide. Wait, what did you say? Yi Ranimo has already died at the hands of your sworn younger brother? Your second younger brother's cultivation is only at the 2nd grade of Sword King? He helped you to annihilate the Saber Emperors in one fell swoop? None of them survived. Yes, what's wrong? Chu Feiling was somewhat proud as he said. My sworn younger brother is very powerful. Yang Ruolan was dumbstruck. Even if one were to break their heads thinking, they wouldn't be able to imagine how a 2nd grade Sword King could help a 3rd grade Saber Emperor kill the other 2 Saber Emperors. It's like this. My sworn younger brother is very crafty. He didn't use his real ability to kill Yi Ranimo. Chu Feiling had no choice but to narrate the situation in detail. He then said with a smile, I was shocked at that time. That's true. Yang Ruolan's gaze was lifeless. Take a guess. What's my cultivation level now? Chu Feiling asked mysteriously. Aren't you a hidden Saber Emperor? What else is there to guess? Yang Ruolan rolled her eyes at him and said, Let's talk seriously. How did you and your sworn younger brother meet? Take a look. Chu Feiling stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion. Suddenly, the spirit energy of the entire space was grabbed by his hand. Then his hand emitted a bright white light. For small pure white circles of light were clearly flashing on his hand. Ah! Yang Ruolan fiercely stood up. She looked at her husband in disbelief. Her eyes were full of shock. You 4th grade Saber Monarch? You're really 4th grade Saber Monarch. But, why are the Sovereign King's rings pure white? Yes, my cultivation is at 4th grade Saber Monarch. But my mental state cultivation is at the peak of Saber Monarch level. Chu Feiling's eyes flashed as he said, That's why the Sovereign King's rings are white. How is this possible? Yang Ruolan covered her small mouth in shock. How can it be so fast? But what's going on with this mental state? Yang Ruolan was an emperor-level expert. So, how could she not know what this meant? A 4th grade Saber Monarch had the mental state of a Saber Monarch. This meant that there was no bottleneck on the road to becoming a Saber Monarch. One would naturally become a Saber Monarch as long as one's cultivation reached a certain level. So, how could it not be easy to increase one's martial power and cultivation? One just had to cultivate. But the most important thing was the mental state. It was possible to seal one's cultivation for a lifetime if one couldn't make a breakthrough in the mental state. For example, if someone had a cultivation of level 3 and a cultivation of level 4, both of them would cultivate together. However, after reaching a certain level, the level 3 cultivator would only be able to consolidate his cultivation, and the excess spiritual energy he absorbed would dissipate soon after. However, the level 4 cultivator would be able to absorb spiritual energy into his body and turn it into cultivation. This was the importance of making a breakthrough in the mental state. This was also the so-called bottleneck. But Chu Feiling's journey was a smooth one. I didn't believe it either. I had been stuck at the Saber Emperor grade for a long time. But my sworn brother gave me a pill. Not only did it increase my cultivation by 5 grades, but it also helped me break through the bottleneck. Moreover, it also promoted my mental cultivation to the Saber Monarch grade. Chu Feiling's eyes flashed. He spoke slowly with a grateful look on his face. What kind of pill? Yang Ruolan felt that her breathing had become rapid. I don't know the name of this pill. Xu Feiling smiled mysteriously and said, but my sworn brother gave me 2 pills. I ate one of them, and my cultivation increased to this level. The other one is for you. Your angina will disappear after you eat it. Moreover, your mental state will also increase to the monarch level. As for how much your martial power and cultivation will increase, that will depend on you. There's such an elixir in the world. Yang Ruolan was so shocked that she was at a loss for words. Didn't I tell you? My sworn brother is very powerful. Xu Feiling smiled proudly. Chapter 500. Xu Feiling took out a purple jade bottle from his bosom as he spoke. He gave it to Yang Ruolan as if it was a treasure. Take it. This is a token of my appreciation for you. Yang Ruolan held the jade bottle in her hand and felt a comfortable feeling all over her body. She couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. It's really a good thing. Your sworn brother is very good to you. My sworn younger brother is indeed a great benefactor to me. Xu Feiling sighed with emotion and said, my sworn brother also gave us 2 medicinal pills in addition to this. According to him, these 2 pills can bring someone back to life, as long as they aren't beheaded on the spot. Moreover, he also gave us a bottle of medicine. After we take it, we'll be able to completely conceal our aura fluctuations. No one will be able to see through us. Yang Ruolan was so shocked that she couldn't speak. These were things that she had never seen or heard of. My sworn brother has given us so many things. Well, my sworn brother also gave you a sword and me a saber. Xu Feiling carefully took out the sword and saber and said, I've tested it. It can cut through iron as if it were mud. It's more than 10 times stronger than my original saber. It can be said that this is the sharpest divine weapon I've ever seen apart from the treasured swords and sabers of the big clans. He took a deep breath and said, even the big clans only have a few treasured swords and sabers. And these swords are passed down from their ancestors. They have already become the sacred objects of their respective clans. So who can see them? Yang Ruolan had already picked up the sword. She took it out and looked at it. She felt a cold light shining on it. It was like a pool of autumn water that reflected all kinds of things in the world. The weight, the length, the size, and the style were all to her liking. She couldn't help but click her tongue in amazement and said, your sworn brother is really a talent. It's rare for him to give me this sword, but it's to my liking. My sworn brother is a heaven-sent genius. I don't know what he doesn't know. Xu Feiling said proudly. Yang Ruolan said, your sworn brother has such deep feelings for you. Feiling, you mustn't let him down. Even if it's just one of these things, it's still a huge favor. Of course. Xu Feiling said with certainty, you should quickly take this medicine. According to my sworn younger brother, this medicine can only be effective for emperor-level experts and above. It won't have any effect on anyone below the emperor realm. Yang Ruolan nodded. She gently and carefully opened the purple jade bottle. Then, she poured out a 7-colored pill from it. A burst of rich and strange fragrance pervaded the air. She didn't dare to neglect it. So, she hastily put it in her mouth. As soon as he put it in, he felt an endless amount of spiritual energy turn into pure energy and rush towards his limbs and bones. He couldn't help but let out a softened sound. Then, he was brought into a mysterious state by the violent medicinal effects. By the time Yang Ruolan woke up, it was already night time. Xu Feiling had been standing guard at the side, not daring to move. Yang Ruolan opened her eyes and operated her primordial energy. She felt that several bottlenecks in her body that she hadn't been able to break through had suddenly been cleared up. Her spirit was clear and transparent. Many of the meanings of the great Tao that she hadn't understood before had also been cleared up. Her entire body, from her soul to her physical body, felt incomparably relaxed. And his own cultivation had actually increased by a large margin. Awesome! Yang Ruolan was somewhat dumbstruck as she checked her own cultivation. She swallowed her saliva with difficulty and said, I'm now a 7th grade emperor-level expert. She stretched out her hand and condensed her primordial energy. Suddenly, 7 oval pure white circles appeared in her hand. She couldn't help but stare blankly. Then she said, "My mental state has also reached the monarch level." She stood up as if she was dreaming. Then she pinched her arm with all her might. She said in a daze, "Is this true? Is it really true?" "It's absolutely true." Chu Feiling held his beloved wife in his arms. However, he found that his wife had already shed tears of surprise. He had never seen his wife so happy since his son had gone missing. So he couldn't help but feel gratified. Yang Ruolan leaned in her husband's arms in a daze. But she couldn't help but shed tears. She said, my child wouldn't have gone missing if we had this kind of cultivation back then." Chu Feiling heaved a deep sigh, and hugged her even tighter. "I must thank that sworn brother of yours properly." Yang Ruolan wiped her tears and said, "Feiling, there are very few people nowadays who value relationships and treat treasures like dirt. We mustn't fail to live up to his kind intentions." Chu Feiling nodded deeply. He said in order to ease his wife's emotions, "It's strange to say that my sworn brother is only 18 years old. He's very handsome. I feel that he's very familiar when I see him. Moreover, his face is somewhat similar to mine. You tell me, isn't this fate bestowed upon us by heaven?" He spoke in high spirits. But he suddenly realized that Yang Ruolan's delicate body had stiffened in his arms. Then, Yang Ruolan turned around like a whirlwind. Her eyes flashed with tears and hope. She said in a trembling voice, "He's only 18 years old, and looks very similar to you, your sworn brother? Could he be?" Chu Feiling was startled. "Could he be our son?" Yang Ruolan's eyes burst with an intense ray of hope. She stared at Chu Feiling's face. "It can't be." Chu Feiling jumped in fright. He was so frightened by these words that he started to sweat. He wiped his sweat twice and said, "It's absolutely impossible. My sworn brother is brave and resourceful. He's domineering and awe-inspiring. He kills decisively and is full of tricks. He's a top-notch talent in the world. Our son. If he's as capable as my sworn brother, then I'll have no regrets even if I die now." He thought in his heart, "Motherfucker, if that little boy is really my son, then I'll die of shame. I'll become sworn brothers with my own son. I'm afraid this matter will become the most legendary story in the heavens. I can't say this casually. What's the name of your sworn brother?" Yang Ruolan didn't pay attention to his joke. She continued to ask, "It's very strange. His surname is also Chu, and his name is Chu Yang." Chu Feiling coughed twice and said, "Chu Yang? King of Hell Chu of the lower three heavens?" Yang Ruolan took a step back. Her eyes emitted an unbelievable light. "How can it be him? Is it him?" "It should be. I haven't seen King of Hell Chu. But my sworn brother has indeed come from the lower three heavens." Chu Feiling nodded. "That's right," Yang Ruolan muttered. Suddenly her face turned red. She recalled that she had just taught that King of Hell Chu a lesson. But she hadn't expected that he was her husband's sworn brother. He was a great benefactor of the entire Chu clan. Am I being ungrateful? She couldn't help but feel ashamed as she thought of this. However, she recalled that King of Hell Chu was a frivolous and hooligan. Then, she recalled her husband's evaluation of him. Brave and resourceful, awe-inspiring and awe-inspiring. He kills decisively, and is full of tricks. So she felt that it wasn't quite the same. Moreover, her husband had said, "My sworn brother's appearance is somewhat similar to mine. But the King of Hell Chu I saw didn't resemble me at all. Could it be that there are two people?" Yang Ruolan became suspicious. "I came back late this time because I had to do something. And the target's name is Chu Yang." Yang Ruolan thought for a while. Then she told the whole story. Chu Feiling was startled. He listened carefully. Then his expression changed as he listened. He said, "You abandoned him? My sworn brother isn't that kind of person. You must have made a mistake. Your master does things arbitrarily. He only cares about his own preferences. He doesn't care about other people's feelings. Moreover, did your junior sister ask you to help her vent her anger? She was willing to do so. What does it have to do with you? Who asked you to deal with her lover? You're simply unreasonable." Yang Ruolan's face turned red. She said, "This matter is indeed somewhat lacking in consideration." "What do you mean by somewhat lacking in consideration?" "It's ridiculous," Chu Feiling said angrily. I don't know whether you're dealing with my sworn brother or not. But how can you and I face him in the future if you're dealing with him? Young Ruolan's face turned red. She said, but this Chu Yang is somewhat glib-tongued. Moreover, he's a king-level expert at the age of 18. But he's like a hooligan. His appearance doesn't resemble yours at all. Moreover, he doesn't have a calm aura. Perhaps they're two different people. Chu Feiling wrinkled his brows and said, that's possible. He muttered to himself for a while. Then he said, I'm still somewhat worried. I'll go and take a look after we've dealt with the spirit beast Tide and the 3 Stars Divine Clan. Yang Ruolan said, that's good. I'll go with you when the time comes. I'll thank him in person. And I'll personally apologize to him and ask for his forgiveness if I've wronged him that time. Chu Feiling nodded. He said in his heart, how could my sworn brother be so easily plotted against by you? That's impossible. He may not be alone. His wisdom and cultivation can go unimpeded for 3 days. 3 days, Chu Yang and the others finally arrived at the northern wilderness after a long and arduous journey. The closer they got, the colder they felt. Everyone sucked in a mouthful of cold air when they finally arrived at the northern wilderness. What a huge glacier and snowfield. They saw that the peaks were wrapped in jade, and it was a world of ice and snow for thousands of miles. It was majestic and boundless. Chu Yang had never been here in his previous life, so he had thought that there would be shadows of people flying everywhere, since so many people from the big clans had arrived in the 3 heavens. However, he realized that this wasn't the case when he arrived here. He couldn't see a single human figure as far as his eyes could see. He also didn't know where those people had gone. However, they were so insignificant that they could be ignored even if they were standing on the glacier. We've finally arrived. Chu Yang's black robe was fluttering in the cold wind. He slowly stepped onto the ice field. He felt the bone-chilling cold coming from the front. The sky was filled with boundless white snow. He suddenly felt a surge of heroic spirit in his heart. Chapter 501. The sword spirit in Chu Yang's mind suddenly flipped violently. His face was full of excitement, causing the entire space to vibrate as if it was dancing. Have we arrived at the northern ice field of the 3 heavens? The sword spirit asked excitedly. Yes, Chu Yang replied. Great. You're finally here. The sword spirit somersaulted excitedly in the space and said, I've been looking forward to this day for a long time. Chu Yang was confused. My sword spirit is sealed here. The sword spirit laughed. It's under the northern ice fields. As long as you can find it, my strength will increase exponentially. The other functions of the space will also be activated. Your cultivation base will also increase greatly. The more help I can't give you, the more. He smiled happily and said, the most important thing is that the quality of the tribulation sword has finally increased by another level. I see. Chu Yang's heart was burning with excitement. The cold air spread from the soles of his feet all the way up. The tribulation sword tip in his dantian suddenly shook violently. An extremely excited emotion was clearly transmitted to Chu Yang's heart. What's going on? Chu Yang's heart was beating wildly. He felt that the sword edge and the sword blade were also vibrating intensely with the excitement of the sword tip. There are countless natural treasures growing on the northern ice fields. Because it's cold here, there are very few people, so it's preserved. The sword spirit said excitedly. And after the tribulation sword swallowed so many precious materials and herbs, it's finally going to advance again, to prepare for the 4th part of the tribulation sword. And this opportunity is here. In the northern ice fields, the sword spirit said with a smile. I forgot to tell you. After the tribulation sword advances this time, it will give birth to a new ability. That is, it can create elixirs to increase anyone's cultivation, and there won't be any future worries. Chu Yang was dumbfounded. He was pleasantly surprised. The sword spirit said, just like your brothers, you can promote them to the emperor level, and then take the heavy elixir to raise their state of mind to the peak of the monarch level. All the previous masters of the tribulation sword have used this method to promote their brothers, so as to form an invincible power that can flatten the heavens. It's just that it will take a long time. I see. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. But you have to be careful. There are several extremely terrifying auras in this northern wilderness. These auras have already left for a long time, but their remnant auras make me feel very formidable. If by any chance we meet such people, I can't come out to help you, because they will discover my existence. That would be even more dangerous for you. The sword spirit reminded. So powerful? Chu Yang frowned. How can there be such a powerful existence in the lower three heavens? These people aren't from the lower three heavens. They have come to the northern wilderness to do something. The sword spirit comforted him. Therefore, you don't have to worry. That's because the heavens' law enforcers will take action as soon as 2 or more of these people appear. In this vast wilderness, there have been 4 such powerful auras. Then, one of them must be a law enforcer. What are the cultivation levels of these auras? Chu Yang asked. It's hard to say. The sword spirit was silent for a while. Then he said, in this world there are many geniuses who live in seclusion. They are extremely talented, but they do things their own way. Their temperaments are indifferent. They often have powerful cultivation levels, but no one knows their names. Every single one of these existences is a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. Once they make a move, it will be earth-shattering. Sword Spirit Wei sighed and said, for generations, the Tribulation Sword Master has been the most powerful in the heaven. In fact, this is indeed the case. But don't forget one thing. The most powerful thing about the past Tribulation Sword Masters is the Tribulation Sword, not the Tribulation Sword Master himself. And the most powerful thing about these existences is their own bodies. The Sword Spirit said heavily, if the Tribulation Sword Master has all the Tribulation Swords, these people won't be his opponents. But if the Tribulation Sword Master uses another sword to fight against these people, he will definitely lose. He warned heavily, he will definitely die. These people respect the Tribulation Sword Master. They don't come out to cause trouble. But they don't respect the current Tribulation Sword Master, but the extraordinary person who created the heaven. The Sword Spirit said, before you get the Tribulation Sword completely, or before you get the 7th fragment of the Tribulation Sword, you don't have the ability to protect yourself. Once you meet such existences, you must be careful. You must be careful. So there are such people in this world, Chu Yang murmured. Suddenly, he felt that the world in front of him had become more colorful. Such people are rare, but they definitely exist. The Sword Spirit said, for example, Chun Feng and Lu Yun, the 2 supreme martial artists. Although they have been alive for 10,000 years, they may not be dead. Supreme martial artists can't live as long as the world, but they can delay aging indefinitely. If that's the case, those people who once followed the Tribulation Sword Master to conquer the world, and the past Tribulation Sword Masters, should be supreme martial artists themselves, right? They may not be dead. Chu Yang asked, puzzled. The Sword Spirit suddenly became silent. He didn't answer this question at all. He fell into an absolute silence. Chu Yang could even feel his thoughts. I won't say it. Even if you beat me to death. Chu Yang helplessly shook his head and smiled. After sorting out his thoughts, he quickly threw these strange stories to the side and thought, how can such a thing be so easy to encounter? The Sword Spirit's remnant soul had returned to its place, and the Tribulation Sword had been upgraded. This had greatly increased the strength of his brothers. Chu Yang was already very satisfied with this. His brothers saw that Chu Yang was so happy. So they all asked for the reason. Chu Yang laughed out loud. He was in a very happy mood. There are friends in the northern wilderness. There are also enemies. There are murderous and hot-blooded people. There are also brothers. There are feelings. Chu Yang laughed boldly. Brothers, you must know that this northern wilderness is going to be the biggest transformation between us. The biggest transformation? What transformation? The brothers were somewhat puzzled. The northern wilderness is full of murderous vibes. The heavenly imperial court is built from here. Chu Yang recalled the Sword Spirit's reminder, and the excitement of the Tribulation Sword in his dantian. He looked up to the sky and shouted, countless opportunities are also here. It will be the time for a fish to transform into a dragon when we leave this place. This is an opportunity given by the heavens. How can we miss it? He laughed out loud. Then he looked up to the sky and shouted. His shout was so fierce that it pierced through the clouds. He then said fiercely, "The world-defying heavens. From today onwards." Shua Du Xing's eyes emitted a sharp cold light. He muttered, "The world-defying heavens from today onwards." I suddenly feel a lofty feeling in my chest. A long shout was heard from afar. A clear and bright voice laughed. The world-defying heavens is indeed very bold. And it's also very boastful. A blue silhouette came from the sky. He flashed in the sky like a meteor and landed in front of Chu Yang. He then said with a smile, "King of Hell Chu, I have been waiting for you for a long time." It was Duke Yu. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. He said, "My debtor has finally arrived. Duke Yu, where are your white crystals?" Duke Yu exposed an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "We haven't seen each other for a long time. And you want to pay the debt as soon as we meet. Is my credit so bad? What kind of credit do you have if you don't pay the debt?" Chu Yang rolled his eyes and said, "Hurry up. I need it urgently." He couldn't help but be anxious. The little girl had been very quiet these days, especially when she saw Chu Yang and the others practicing martial arts. Her eyes became even more bitter. Chu Yang was very distressed. The most direct way to untie the little girl's heart was to let the tribulation sword work with the heavy pill to cure her 3-yin meridian. Then, Mo Qing Wu could continue to practice. She wouldn't feel pain in her chest every time she practiced like she was now. And the key to the improvement of the tribulation sword was the white crystal, or in Duke Yu's hands. Duke Yu snorted and said, "Fine. Come, I will first pay the debt to you." Then, he jumped up and said, "Follow me." Chu Yang carried Mo Qing Wu on his back and followed closely behind. Shua Du Xing and the others also jumped up. They were like a long line of dragons whistling in the wind and snow. They ran on the slippery ice field. In an instant they had covered dozens of miles. The wind and snow were getting heavier and heavier. Suddenly, a strange cry came from afar in front of the wind and snow. "A spirit beast of the same level has appeared." Duke Yu, who was running like lightning, suddenly stopped. He stood on the slippery ice field like a nail. Without any hesitation, he changed his direction and said, "Let's go and take a look." His green robe fluttered, and he went more than 500 feet away. Chu Yang didn't have time to stop. He had already rushed more than 1,000 feet on the slippery ice field. Then he turned around and followed him while cursing. "This bastard! Why did he change his direction halfway? Is he trying to renege on his debt?" Everyone flew in that direction. Except for Chu Yang. Everyone was very interested in the mysterious spirit beast of the same level. After all, it was the main goal of everyone's trip. Outside the ice plains, several hundred li away, 2 figures were walking over. Although the 2 of them had walked together, their movements, expressions, demeanor, and appearance, no matter which aspect it was, they were completely different. Looking at these 2 people, anyone would have a feeling. These are people from 2 different worlds. Absolutely so. This kind of feeling. One was walking leisurely, and the other was running fast. One looked calm and elegant, and the other was anxious and impatient. One's green robe fluttered, as if he was taking a stroll. The other's black robe fluttered, as if he was fighting for his life. The other's facial features were regular, and he looked like a gentleman. His beard fluttered in the wind. He looked like a celestial being. His expression was indifferent, as if he didn't care about anything in this world. But the other's appearance was, damn, this appearance is really indescribable. It's absolutely indescribable. There are many ugly people, but such an ugly person has never been seen in the history of the heavens. This person's appearance is definitely unprecedented in the history of the heavens. Chapter 502. These 2 were Meng Chao Ran and Tan Tan. Meng Chao Ran helplessly frowned and said, "Tan Tan, I have something to discuss with you." Tan Tan was shocked and said, "Please say it, master." Meng Chao Ran's face was full of black lines. He said weakly, "You don't have to be so shocked when we are together, right? You are beautiful. I have raised you for 18 years. Don't you know? Why are you so shocked in front of me?" Tan Tan acted as if he didn't hear anything. He skillfully tidied his hair with his hands. He raised his head and shook his hair. Then, he skillfully took out a mirror from his bosom. He suddenly shouted in shock. Master, master, look! I haven't looked in the mirror for a few days. I have become more handsome. Meng Qiaoran's face was full of black lines. Just pretend I didn't say anything. He was extremely depressed as he walked forward. Tan Tan carefully looked at himself in the room. Then he smugly said, Motherfucker! You've become even more handsome. If Xie Danfeng were to see this, she would definitely be charmed to death. In his bosom, a golden fish tail suddenly stretched out powerlessly and shook twice. Meng Qiaoran sighed. Even the divine qi gathering fish is disgusted. Tan Tan tidied up his appearance in front of the mirror. Then he crooked his mouth and squinted his eyes to make a few expressions. Then, he looked very shocked in front of the mirror. Then he said, Master, do you think Chu Yang will go this time? He will definitely go. Meng Qiaoran said with certainty. I heard that the bride-snatching battle was very lively. Unfortunately, I didn't make it. Tan Tan looked at Meng Qiaoran with hidden bitterness. It is all your fault, master. I had to break through the bottleneck at that time. Meng Qiaoran's face was like iron. He turned a deaf ear and sped up. He left this shameless disciple far behind. Too shameless. You reached the bottleneck, and the opportunity to break through. That's why you were delayed. Now you want to blame me for this? Do you know how difficult it is for a martial artist to encounter such an opportunity? You were a bastard just now. If Meng Qiaoran's self-cultivation was not so good, he would have grabbed this little guy and punched him. Senior brother, if you see me, you definitely won't recognize me. Tan Tan was so happy that he couldn't help but take out a mirror to look at himself. Then he said in self-pity, Chu Yang looks so shabby. He's never seen such a handsome guy like me. Meng Qiaoran's silhouette flashed. He couldn't bear it any longer, and hurriedly rushed back. He grabbed Tan Tan's lapel, and fiercely shouted, Shut up. If you dare to say another word, then scram back to your training. You are not allowed to come out again. Meng Qiaoran's elegant face was somewhat distorted. That was too fucking unbearable. Ever since this guy had discovered that shock could improve one's appearance, he had been living in an abyss of suffering and suffering. Being with this disciple every day, Meng Qiaoran felt his temples throbbing every day. I'm really worried that the next moment, I'll get a nervous headache, and Tan Tan was flabbergasted as he looked at his master. He wanted to ask, but he didn't dare to. However, his eyes were full of shock. This time he didn't need to be shocked. He could be shocked. Meng Qiaoran felt powerless as he saw Tan Tan's expression. He slowly loosened his grip and let go of Tan Tan. He said, Your master couldn't control his temper. But you not be so narcissistic? Master, you've wronged me too much. Tan Tan pursed his lips in grievance. He felt that he had suffered a great injustice. He even felt like crying. I'm not narcissistic at all. I'm so handsome. How can I be narcissistic? Meng Qiaoran's temples bulged. He heaved a deep sigh and weakly loosened his grip. Then he said in a grief-stricken tone, Let's go, okay? The master and disciple had arrived at Mt Dingjun by the time that the place was empty. They had arrived 3 days late. Then, they had heard that a spirit beast had appeared in the northern wilderness. So, Meng Qiaoran had brought Tan Tan here to gain experience. Gaining experience was one thing, but Meng Qiaoran's main purpose was to hand Tan Tan over to Anyang. Then he would go to a faraway place and immerse himself in cultivation. Meng Qiaoran felt that he could live a few more years, even if he couldn't see this guy for a lifetime. I've had enough. People who hadn't stayed with Tan Tan for a long time wouldn't know what kind of torture this was. For example, if you saw Sister Feng flirting with infinite narcissism in front of you every day, I think a man would go crazy in a very short time. It was a miracle that Meng Qiaoran had persisted for so long. Both of them had been gaining experience in the Songlan battlefront for more than a year. Tan Tan's divine qi gathering fish had grown to more than 2 feet long. It usually nestled in Tan Tan's bosom obediently. It didn't need to stay in the water anymore. It could gather spirit energy on its own. So it didn't need to worry about food and drink. The spirit energy of the world had been absorbed by the divine qi gathering fish. So, it didn't need to be converted into internal spirit energy. Moreover, It was enough for both of them to practice martial arts at the same time. The strength of both the master and disciple had increased at lightning speed during this period of time. Meng Qiaoran hadn't thought that he would be able to continuously break through bottlenecks by basking in the glory of his disciple. Tan Tan had broken through to the revered martial artist level in a short period of time. And Meng Qiaoran had also broken through to the 8th grade of king level. Meng Qiaoran had discovered a very strange thing along with the practice of martial arts. The divine qi gathering fish had been absorbing more and more spirit energy as it grew, and its progress had been getting faster and faster. In particular, the higher the level of cultivation had been, the faster the breakthrough had been. This phenomenon was really mysterious to a certain extent. In particular, the water that the divine qi gathering fish needed for its daily life was completely condensed from spirit energy. Meng Qiaoran and Tan Tan drank a mouthful of it every day, and their cultivation had been advancing at a tremendous pace. Meng Qiaoran had also discovered a problem. That was, Tan Tan could drink the spirit energy water condensed by the divine qi gathering fish any way he wanted. Even if he drank 1,000 mouthfuls, this guy would quickly go and make more. But the divine qi gathering fish would fiercely glare at Meng Qiaoran every time he drank a mouthful of it. It was as if it had a spiritual wisdom. Moreover, this broken fish would only gather a large amount of spirit energy when it was beside Tan Tan during its daily practice. And its belly would turn upside down if Tan Tan wasn't around. In fact, it would simply defecate. Meng Qiaoran was puzzled by this discovery. Tan Tan had abused this strange fish a lot. He had thrown it into the cesspool on the first day he had obtained it, and he had become even more severe after that. He would often pull it out and study it whenever he had nothing to do. He wanted to know why this fish was able to gather the spirit energy of the world. Tan Tan had been very diligent in his research. He had once put the divine qi gathering fish in water. Then, he had used a cloth to wrap its mouth, nose, and eyes. It had almost suffocated to death. Later, he had fished it out of the water and exposed it to the sun. And it had almost lost its skin. It would have died if it hadn't learned how to transform spirit energy into water. Then, Tan Tan had removed several scales from the divine qi gathering fish's body and had crushed them for research. The most outrageous thing was that he had used a small knife to cut a piece of the fish's flesh. And this strange fish had almost lost its life. It could be said that this divine qi gathering fish wouldn't have been able to live for more than 3 days without Meng Qiaoran's help. Meng Qiaoran had constantly stopped Tan Tan's atrocities, and he had saved the divine qi gathering fish's life at least 30 or 50 times. However, this strange fish didn't care about Meng Qiaoran at all. Instead, it seemed to be very close to Tan Tan. Meng Qiaoran was very knowledgeable, but he sometimes felt depressed. What's so good about this little fish? Why is this fish so dead set on him? Meng Qiaoran sighed as he thought of this. He pointed to the front and said, "We will enter the northern wilderness in another 500 miles. Chuyang should have arrived there by now." Tan Tan was overjoyed. He jumped up and said in a shocked manner, "That's great. That's great. I must give that unprepossessing Chuyang a big surprise this time. A beautiful man like me who can cause the downfall of a nation will appear in front of him." Waha! Meng Qiaoran suddenly turned his head. His complexion turned ashen. He was speechless as he ran away with tears in his eyes. "I can't take it anymore. I really can't take it anymore. Oh God!" Chu Yang and the others were approaching. They could only hear the strange cry getting closer and closer. It seemed that the spirit beast was being besieged. However, the cry of this spirit beast was loud and clear. But it didn't sound like it was in pain. It seemed that this guy didn't care about the people who were besieging it. They passed through an almost transparent ice wall, and they saw the scene in front of them. Everyone was shocked. They saw a monster that was hundreds of feet tall. It was brandishing its 2 huge claws. Its body was like a small mountain, but it was as agile as a spirit monkey. It was jumping and leaping. Its movements were very agile. Many broken corpses were lying in the vicinity. Many people were seriously injured. They were moaning as they rested. There were still hundreds of people present, and they were fiercely besieging this monster. However, their attacks were clearly not enough to threaten the 1-grade spirit beast. What kind of monster is this? Chuyang asked in his mind. The sword spirit disdainfully glanced at it and said, "It's just an ancient ice bear. How can such a stupid thing be called a spirit beast?" Ancient ice bear? Chuyang asked. Yes. The sword spirit replied. The ancient ice bear is also called the giant bear of the wilderness. It's an 8th grade spirit beast. It's usually 30 feet tall and weighs more than 3,000 kilograms. But its body will suddenly expand by 10 times in an emergency. And its strength will also increase by 10 times. Its most effective means of attack is its body. It can spit out icicles from its mouth. These icicles can be used as lethal weapons. But it will consume a lot of its cultivation every time it spits them out. Chapter 503. Well, its real function is its left front palm. Chuyang was speechless. He looked at this majestic giant bear that was surrounded by dozens of king-level experts. But the sword spirit said that it was useless. Dookie was also disappointed. He muttered, "Motherfucker, how did this thing come out? What kind of spirit beast is this?" He suddenly became angry. "This is a waste of my time." Then he suddenly shouted, "Everyone get out of my way. Are you all going to give food to this monster by squeezing in here?" Everyone who was fighting was furious. They turned around and saw a figure rushing over at lightning speed. Dooku's green robe fluttered in the wind. His body tore through the air and tore apart the snowflakes. A thunderous sound echoed in the sky. His body brought about a strong airflow and sent dozens of king-level experts flying. He arrived on top of the ancient ice bear's head. He didn't say anything and ferociously kicked the shoulder of this big bear. The ice bear let out a loud roar, and its mountain-like body was kicked into the air. It flew 70 to 80 feet away and landed on its butt on an ice peak with a loud bang. The ice peak shattered into pieces with a series of crashing sounds. Then it jumped up and looked at Dooku in horror. Dooku was about to fly over. Then it suddenly screamed, turned around and ran away. This arrogant monster had been swaggering around a moment ago, but it was now running away with its tail between its legs after being kicked by Dooku. This shocking scene made everyone open their mouths and eyes wide open. They looked at Dooku as if they were looking at an immortal. Is he still human? Dooku didn't give chase. Instead, he landed on the ground with his clothes fluttering in the wind. He looked at the group of people with disdain and said in a disdainful manner, "Trash, like you actually dared to chase after a spirit beast. Do you know that a spirit beast's fart can kill you? You're so ignorant. Why aren't you getting out of my way? Do you want to die?" That group of people obviously came from several clans. Dooku's words were unpleasant to hear, but they didn't dare to refute him. They didn't even dare to look at him with angry eyes. They just smiled and retreated. "I'm asking you to get out of my way. Don't you understand?" Dooku was furious. He rushed forward and kicked a man's butt. With a paw sound, the man immediately rolled forward like a rubber ball. "That's how it should be. Get out of my sight. Otherwise you'll die." Dooku was clearly a little irritable. He kicked 7 or 8 times in succession and kicked the 7 or 8 king-level experts like rubber balls. The group of people dared to be angry, but did not dare to say anything. They could only bow down and choose to scram in humiliation, quickly leaving. Even after these people had rolled away and disappeared from his sight, Dooku's anger still hadn't subsided. "Brother Yu's temper is a bit big today," Chuyang gently smiled and asked. "This Duke came here for the spirit beasts. Only spirit beasts are of great use. Yet, I ran into a bastard bear that pretends to be a spirit beast." Dooku snorted and said, "If the commotion this time was caused by this bear, then wouldn't we have made a wasted trip? This level of spirit beast. How could it be so easy to see?" Sigh. At the end of his speech he actually sighed. "I see." Chuyang secretly nodded. He thought that this was the reason. No wonder he didn't even care about the inner core of this ice bear. It turned out that he only had one goal, and that was to find a spirit beast. We've seen many spirit beasts before. Most of them were 5th or 7th grade. They weren't very powerful either. Why is this ice bear so tyrannical when it's only 8th grade? Shua Duxing came forward and asked, "How can 7th grade and 8th grade be compared? This is the difference between heaven and earth." Yu said angrily. Moreover, this ice bear is at the peak of 8th grade. It needs a strong opportunity and time to break through to the 8th grade. This is also the reason why I didn't kill it. Chu Yang laughed. So Brother Yu is still waiting for this big guy to break through. In case we can't find a spirit beast, then this ice bear can barely be used after it breaks through. Yu said with a gloomy face. While talking, everyone used their movement techniques and set off towards the depths of the wilderness. By nightfall, they had already run for thousands of miles. A towering mountain stood in front of them. That's my home. Yu stopped his footsteps and looked at the ice peak in a somewhat melancholy manner. His voice carried a trace of nostalgia as he said, I grew up here. I've been here since I can remember. Haha, I don't have parents, relatives, masters, or friends. The only thing that has been accompanying me has always been here. This ice peak. Chu Yang and Shua Duxing looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. I didn't leave here until I reached the emperor level. Then I went to the upper 3 heavens. Yu sighed as he looked at the familiar scenery of this place. He said in a low voice, I didn't know why other people have parents, but I don't. I always felt that it was unfair because of this. But I later found out that other people don't have parents because they are dead, missing, or abandoned. But I don't have any parents at all. Chu Yang pondered over these words in his heart. Suddenly, he felt extremely shocked. I don't have any parents at all. What does this mean? Inside Chu Yang's mind, the sword spirit also opened his eyes wide in shock. He muttered, So he is what? The sword spirit didn't continue to speak. I wandered in the upper 3 heavens for several years, but I finally felt that there was nothing fun to do there. So, I offended a big clan in order to save a person, and the person I saved immediately betrayed me. So, I was chased down by 3 saint-level experts of that big clan. I was finally caught. Then I was crippled, and my aptitude was destroyed. Ha ha ha. How can I be a good person? Chu Yang and the others were full of amazement. They hadn't expected that this handsome Yu of the upper 3 heavens was the minister of the dark bamboo, and he had such a tragic past. Yu forced a smile. His face was full of bitterness. In the face of this icy mountain, his mentality seemed to have suddenly become somewhat weak. They thought that I would die for sure. Unfortunately, I didn't die. Moreover, I escaped. I went through many twists and turns in the upper 3 heavens. Then I started from scratch, and I arrived here step by step. Then, I wandered in the upper 3 heavens, and met Jun Shizhu. Yu faintly smiled. I lost the bet, so I promised to do something for her. But I must take revenge for what happened in the upper 3 heavens. Yu's green robe fluttered in the wind. He stood in front of the ice peak and insipidly said, This is my experience. Isn't it monotonous? It's not monotonous. Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, It's very rocky. And it's also very admirable. I can't guarantee that I wouldn't have reached your level if I had encountered your situation. Our physiques are different. Yu gently smiled and said, We have fundamental differences. His green robe fluttered in the wind. Then he insipidly said, Come with me. I'll fulfill my promise to you and repay my gambling debt. Second update. I'm not in good spirits today. That's all. Aunt Guan gave me a fierce blow. Asterisk. The real reason is, I went to learn how to drive this afternoon. I've been trying to get a driver's license for almost a year now. I failed the road test once. So, I'll fail 10 times if I don't pass. Now, the instructors of my driving school have started to give me gifts. They call me Grandpa when they see me. But it's useless. I can't pass the test even if they call me Grandpa. Do you think I can pass the test just because I want to? Motherfucker. Who doesn't want to pass the test? This afternoon, I drove my cousin's Mercedes-Benz to practice driving. And I rushed into the flower bed of the development zone. I'm still sweating now. I'm scared. The car is fine. But my cousin doesn't want me to come. Sigh, I'm going to sleep first. I'll sweat it out first. Chapter 504. Yu floated forward and said indifferently, Only Chu Yang. You can come with me. The rest of you can wait here. After all, I only owe Chu Yang, not you. Baidu search network high quality update Chu Yang gestured for Gu Duxing and the others to wait here for a while. Then he followed Dukyu alone. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang looked at each other and saw the understanding in each other's eyes. Luo Kudi and GMO were a little angry. However, Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang were cold and lonely people. They could understand Dukyu. Although they didn't have the same twists and turns as Dukyu, the two of them had this feeling before. Moreover, one's status and strength also determined one's habits and mood. Therefore, Gu Duxing looked at Dukyu's back with eyes full of understanding, envy and pity. He envied his strength and pitied his loneliness. It was easy for a person at the lowest level to make friends. He could call his friends to play with him all day long. That was because there were too many people like him. But once he had a certain status, the number of true friends would start to decrease. That kind of defense would arise in his heart for no reason. He would subconsciously keep a distance from others. This made the word friend become a natural moat. And a person at the top would only have subordinates and allies left. The word ally also had the word friend in it. But the unfamiliarity and vigilance could sometimes make people feel worse than facing an enemy. If he was a dictator, he could only be lonely. This was also the reason why the emperors of the past could only be called loners. Because their status determined that they would never ever have friends. Perhaps they also desired to have friends in their hearts. But in reality they could only be lonely. No one would dare to make friends with such people. Chu Yang was lamenting about this matter in his heart. If one wanted to have both strength and friends, they would have to be like him. They would have to work hard and improve together with their brothers to reach the peak together. This kind of friendship that had become a habit, an instinct since young could last forever. Chu Yang decided that no matter what, he couldn't be as lonely as Dukyu. He could feel that Dukyu's emotions were obviously very intense and extreme at this moment. If someone provoked him at this moment, it would definitely be as terrifying as a volcanic eruption. As for Dukyu's emotional fluctuations, it should be because of the sudden appearance of the ancient ice bear, which had aroused his resentment towards the spirit beasts. So, what kind of use would a spirit beast have for Dukyu? No matter what the use was, it was definitely going to be huge, right? Otherwise, Dukyu would not have lost his composure like this. Dukyu had grown up in this place since he was a child. He could kick a peak 8th grade spirit beast more than 30 meters away with a single kick. Could it be that he had never seen a peak grade spirit beast before? Or perhaps there was no other way. Then how terrifying would a spirit beast be? Was there really such a huge difference in just one level? Chu Yang pondered over these things in his heart. He seemed to have thought of something. Theoretically speaking, there should be a difference of one level. The difference is like the difference between heaven and earth, right? But why wasn't the level difference that big before this? Could it be that spirit beasts had to cultivate the same way as humans? The higher the level, the stricter the hierarchy, and the distinctions between the two? He was silent the entire way as he followed Dukyu into the icy mountain. Dukyu's green robe fluttered in the wind as he arrived at the foot of the mountain. Chu Yang suddenly discovered that this icy peak was very different from the other peaks. It was actually vertical. Moreover, it was one from top to bottom. Rather than saying that this was a cloud-piercing mountain, it would be better to say that this was an entire piece of ancient mysterious ice. This is my home. Dukyu clasped his hands behind his back as he stood at the foot of this icy peak. His back was facing Chu Yang. He seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life as he lightly said, "You are the first guest in my home after so many years." As he spoke, he shook his sleeves and revealed his clean hands. Then, he grabbed a ball of ice and snow from the air and carefully wiped his 10 fingers. With a thought, the whistling ice and snow covered his entire body. Then it dissipated with a bang. Chu Yang had a feeling that the current Dukyu was much cleaner than before. He actually washed his entire body before entering his home. It could be seen how much he loved this home of his. My home needs to be clean when I enter it, and leave it clean when I come out. When I come and go, it must not be tainted with dust. When I come and go, it must not be tainted with dust. Dukyu softly said, "Only I can enter this place. Even if I get married in the future, only I can enter." Even my wife and children can't enter this home of mine." He gently smiled as if he was filled with helplessness. Then he said, "But now there is one more you." As he spoke, he stretched out his hands and clasped them together in front of his chest. Then he slowly separated them. Suddenly, a pure and holy white light appeared between his hands. The white light flashed and fiercely shone on the ice wall of the icy peak. Then, a wave of pure heaven and earth energy suddenly spread out from this ice wall. Chu Yang smelled it and felt comfortable all over. Then, a door silently appeared on the ice wall. The inside of the door was filled with gentle white light. This door appeared so naturally, just like this ice mountain. It existed so naturally. Duke Yu's hands hung down as he looked at this door with infinite longing. He gently exhaled and said, "Please come in, Chu Yang." Chu Yang hesitated for a moment and said, "Since your wife can't enter, then wouldn't it be inappropriate for me to enter? Why don't I wait for you outside?" "No need. My wife can't enter, but it doesn't mean that you can't as well." Duke Yu's eyes flashed. He said, "I don't want you to enter either, but I feel that you should." Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, "Okay." Following behind Duke Yu, he walked into this magical icy peak. Before he walked in, he turned back to take a look. He was looking in the direction where Gu Duxing and the others were. But he only saw the wind and snow all over the sky. He didn't see anything else. It was as if Gu Duxing, Mo Qinggu and the others had all suddenly disappeared at this moment. "They can't see this place, and you can't see them either," Duke Yu said coldly. "If I don't want others to see my residence, even supreme martial artists can't see it. This has nothing to do with cultivation, but is the principle of heaven and earth. The private nature of heaven and earth." Duke Yu laughed mischievously. Chu Yang didn't know why, but he felt that Duke Yu's laughter was full of ridicule and coldness. It was as if he didn't care about the principle of heaven and earth, the private nature of heaven and earth, that Duke Yu had just said. The moment the footsteps of the two people disappeared inside the door suddenly disappeared from the world. What appeared between the heaven and earth was still that icy peak that didn't seem to be any different from the other peaks. It stood there silently. After Chu Yang went in, he was startled. This mountain peak was indeed a hole. However, the space inside seemed to be formed by nature. The white light in the surroundings came from nowhere, but it shone softly, making the inside of this space very clear. Chu Yang felt as if he was walking in his own dream. The air inside this space formed by the icy peak was fresh and clean, as warm as spring. In fact, there was even an extremely lush heavenly orchid growing on one side of the passage. It almost covered half of the stone wall. Looking at the appearance of this heavenly orchid, each piece was like the most exquisite jade, and there was only one flower left in the center. The color of the flower had already turned into a colorful color. Chu Yang smacked his lips fiercely. This heavenly orchid has already grown for 10,000 years. The heavenly orchid changes every 10,000 years, and only one color appears every 10,000 years. The heavenly orchid only adds one color every 10,000 years. It was the supreme elixir of the world. However, this kind of supreme spiritual medicine was completely useless to ordinary people. In fact, it was a deadly poison. Even an emperor-level expert would explode and die after eating one piece of it. It was rumored that the heavenly orchid's petals could solidify one's divine soul forever, once one reached the saint level or above. Moreover, one could reincarnate with a complete memory and 30% of one's cultivation if they died after eating the heavenly orchid. Think about it. A saint-level expert would become an infant with a saint-level memory and 30% of one's cultivation, and then cultivate again with this as the most basic foundation. How terrifying would that be? 30% of a saint-level expert's strength would be at least at the monarch level. A person who was bound to die would be able to solidify his divine soul forever if he ate the heavenly orchid and reincarnate. Therefore, this heavenly orchid was the #1 panacea in the world, but it was useless to the living. It was only useful to the dead. In other words, it was only useful to the soul. However, for such a huge function, there were also extremely harsh conditions. And that was, the color of the heavenly orchid must reach 10 colors. Even an immortal wouldn't be able to save it if it had 10 colors. But 10 colors meant that it was 100,000 years old. Who could wait for such a long time? Therefore, it only existed in legends. However, Chu Yang had never imagined that he would see a 10,000-year-old heavenly orchid as soon as he came in. The sword spirit's breathing became hurried like a bellows. He was so excited that his lips trembled. Chu Yang, Sword Lord, this heavenly orchid. You must get your hands on it. This thing is simply too useful for you and me. Chu Yang frowned. Ha! My divine soul will be solidified forever. The sword spirit's eyes stared straight. Saliva was dripping from the corners of his mouth. Wouldn't I be a divine soul? Moreover, I'm a remnant soul. I really need this thing. I'm afraid it won't be easy. Chu Yang was very hesitant. Duke Yu is very protective of his home. So he obviously treasures it to the extreme. It would be very difficult for me to take away this 10,000-year-old heavenly orchid from here. Moreover, I can't steal it. People respect me, and I respect them tenfold. Duke Yu invited me here. Could it be that he wants me, Chu Yang, to be a thief? Chu Yang wouldn't be able to get over this hurdle in his heart if he took it without asking. But what do I have to move Duke Yu? Chapter 505. He smiled proudly and said, but after so many years, only these 5 items are qualified to be placed here by me. Duke Yu walked forward slowly and said, come, let me introduce them to you. As he spoke, he walked to the front of the first shelf. Chu Yang saw very clearly that these were 3 grains of black sand. They looked very ordinary. This is heavenly river sand. When Duke Yu said these 3 words, it was as if a thunderbolt had struck in Chu Yang's heart. Heavenly river sand. The legendary heavenly river sand that could turn something rotten into something magical. A grain of Milky Way sand could transform a trash that practiced chi reversal into an unparalleled genius. Whether it was his aptitude or his comprehension, it would increase by thousands of times. Heavenly river sand was originally not something that belonged to this world. Instead, it was a treasure left behind by the legendary person who created the heavens. Where it came from was no longer known. But the heavenly river sand's function was not limited to this. The Milky Way sand was something that could turn anything rotten into something magical. If ordinary iron was used to forge a weapon, if a grain of heavenly river sand was added, it could cut through iron like mud. If one was lucky enough to refine a grain of heavenly river sand in his meridians, then no matter how he cultivated, he would not encounter any bottlenecks. But if one wanted to refine this thing, they would need a supreme opportunity and fate. Without fate, even a supreme martial artist would not be able to refine it. And Duke Yu actually had 3 grains here. There were originally 4 grains of this thing, but I had refined 1 before. So it became 3 grains. That's why I was able to make a comeback in a very short time after being crippled. Duke Yu looked at Chu Yang and smiled. He said, when I refined this thing, I was only 3 years old. I understand. Chu Yang suddenly realized. Yes, you understood half of it. Chu Yang did not say what he understood, but Duke Yu directly said that he only understood half of it, and his tone was very certain. Oh, but what is the other half? Chu Yang asked. You only understood that refining this heavenly river sand requires a red heart, without any distracting thoughts. But you did not know that it not only requires a red heart, but also an innate spirit. Duke Yu said lightly, for example, someone like me. So that's how it is. Chu Yang suddenly realized. He lost interest in this plaything. Good stuff, this is a good stuff. No wonder Duke Yu was able to refine it so quickly. However, this thing was useless to Chu Yang. After all, not everyone had the same background as Duke Yu. Chi Xian was easy to find, but an innate spiritual body like Duke Yu was even harder to find than the heavenly river sand. It seems like you're not interested. Duke Yu smiled and walked to the second shelf. This is purple crystal jade essence. It's one of the lesser things I have here, but it's a treasure of this layer of heaven. It's very hard to find. Purple crystal jade essence. These words made Chu Yang's heart skip a beat. Wasn't his identity jade token the purple crystal jade essence? Stepping forward to take a closer look, he held it in his hand. regardless of whether it was the color or the feel of it. It was exactly the same as his own piece of purple crystal jade essence. Furthermore, when he recalled the shape of the jade token, it seemed to be able to merge with the one in front of him. It was as if they were originally a single entity. This seems to be missing a piece. It feels a little incomplete, Chu Yang said tentatively. Your eyesight is really good. Speaking of which, there's a story behind this piece of purple crystal jade essence. Dukyu smiled. There was a trace of nostalgia in his eyes. There was even a bit of warmth. Back then, when I was traveling in the upper three heavens, a family happened to buy a piece of heavenly crystal stone. They spent a huge sum of money. At that time, there were a few other people and I who were bidding for it. However, it was won by that guy. I didn't have enough money with me, and I wasn't willing to use treasures to exchange for it. Haha. Then, I had a chance to drink with that person at the same table. We got along very well. He then invited me to see the heavenly crystal stone with my own eyes. At that time, I was also very curious about that stone, so I went. You must know that once a heavenly crystal stone is cut open, it's either purple crystal, blue crystal, or white crystal inside. Before it's opened, no one can see it. Although I had some confidence that the heavenly crystal stone could contain something good, I didn't dare to be sure. So I followed to verify my own eyesight. In the end, when it was cut open, it turned out to be a big piece of variegated purple crystal. That old man was very depressed. Dukyu recalled the events of that year and smiled very happily. But when it reached that level, I sensed that there was a very restrained aura of treasure inside. So, I suggested that he use the crystal grinding hand to grind out the variegated purple crystal. He listened to my advice. After he finished grinding, he actually took out a piece of rare purple crystal jade essence from inside. It's this piece, Dukyu said. In order to thank me, he divided this piece of purple crystal jade essence into 2 pieces, and gave me half of it. At that time, his granddaughter was about to get married, and his great-grandson was about to be born. So he made his half into 2 pieces of jade. 2 pieces of jade. Chu Yang's heart beat like a drum. In that instant, he felt that his eyes were a little blurry. That old man then asked me to carve a name on those 2 pieces of jade. One piece was prepared for his great-grandson, and the other piece was prepared for his great-grandson. I still remember that I used my supreme martial arts and martial saint strength to carve a word on the inside of the jade essence, without damaging the surface of these 2 pieces of jade. What word? Chu Yang asked anxiously. I've carved the word Yang on one of the pieces, and the word Chu on the other piece. Dukyu smiled in a carefree manner. Chu Yang's whole body trembled. The secret of his identity jade had finally been unintentionally solved today. It was a gift from his grandfather, and the word on it was actually carved by Dukyu himself. What's wrong with this world? What kind of topsy-turvy world is this? Chu Yang grumbled in his heart, but his eyes couldn't help but heat up a little. Of course, at that old man's request, I also spent some money to set up a restriction. At that time, I once jokingly said, "Old man, I can carve this word today. In the future, when your child is born, you can drip the blood from the tip of the baby's tongue onto this piece of jade, and it can be combined with the surname of the child. After 5 years, the connection will slowly become stronger and stronger. With my restriction, you won't be able to lose your child even if you want to." Dukyu laughed heartily. Obviously, he remembered the strange expression on his old friend's face back then, and he quickly came to his senses. It's no wonder. That old man was wholeheartedly waiting for his great-grandson to come back, and this guy actually cursed him to lose his child. This was such a spoilsport. Chu Yang's lips twitched a few times, and he bitterly raised his head to look at this super crow mouth. Motherfucker. If you didn't say this back then, I might not have lost my child. Chapter 506. Not long after that incident, I was besieged and attacked. That elder brother of mine was seriously injured in order to help me. Even his clan was almost destroyed. There was a nostalgic look on Dukyu's face as he said, "This piece of purple crystal jade essence isn't much of a treasure. However, the reason why I placed it here is because, in the entire heavens, Only one person helped me back then. Asterisk asterisk Baidu search network's high-quality updates the fastest asterisk asterisk. I kept it here as a sign of friendship, Dukyu said slowly. So that's how it is. Xu Yang's throat was dry. He felt that he wouldn't say anything else today. He kept repeating this sentence over and over again. So that's how it is. Too unexpected. Too amazing. It's a miracle. Looking at this guy's young face, he seemed to be less than 30 years old. I didn't expect him to have lived for so many years. Motherfucker great-grandson? Didn't that mean that this guy was actually from my great-grandfather's generation? Brother you. Xu Yang laughed dryly. Huh. Dukyu looked at him with a puzzled expression. You want this? No. Brother you cough cough. Brother you. Xu Yang repeatedly called out brother you a few times. He thought in his heart. Motherfucker. I can even take advantage of this form of address. Calling him a few more times is better than being forced to call him grandpa you later, right? Motherfucker, what is this? What is it? Dukyu was puzzled. Cough cough. Brother you, what I mean is, brother you, haven't you gone back to take a look for so many years? Xu Yang asked casually. I want to go back and take a look. But my current cultivation is not enough. Dukyu sighed. If I go back, I'm afraid that I'll implicate my elder brother's clan and cause its destruction. How would I dare to go back? I changed my appearance and hid for 3 days for so many years because I didn't want them to be implicated by me. One of the Zai clans of the upper 3 heavens. How could it be so easy to deal with them? Dukyu was somewhat disappointed. If they knew that I was crippled to such an extent and was still able to recover, this would be a secret that those Zai clans would dream of knowing. If someone were to discover that I was that person from back then. Oh, I see. Xu Yang understood. He didn't expect that such a carefree person like Duke, you would be so meticulous when it came to thinking for others. It's a pity that I haven't been able to see my elder brother all these years. I do miss him a little. Dukyu's thoughts wandered. We should look at the third treasure now. Xu Yang felt a chill run down his spine when he heard him call him elder brother. So, he touched his nose and said, Damn it, you want to take advantage of me? No way. Even though the sword spirit was very depressed right now, he couldn't help but feel proud of it. This is the third treasure. Dukyu looked at the white snowflakes on the third lotus flower. His voice was heated as he said, But this thing, I can't give it to you even if you want it. I have a great use for it. I want to keep it. When I reach the bottleneck of the Supreme Being realm, I will use this thing to break through to the Supreme Being realm in one go. He took a deep look at the snow-white snowflakes and said, This is a snowflake that reaches the heavens. It only has one use, and that is to break through. All right then. Xu Yang spread out his hands. Since you don't want to give it to me, what's the point of talking about it? Next one. Xu Yang really wasn't interested in this snowflake, because this thing was used to break through to the Supreme Being realm. How long would it take for him to break through to the Supreme Being realm? Even though this thing could be kept in Dukyu's hands, it would probably fuse with his body before he could store it in the tribulation space. And this thing could help a saint-level cultivator break through to the Supreme Being realm. How much energy would it contain? Even the sword spirit wouldn't be able to extract the energy before he exploded and died. In that case, he would become the first tribulation sword master in history to die of greed. The fourth one is the real gift I prepared for you. Dukyu smiled and said, This is a piece of sun and moon ointment. He smiled and said, I promised you purple crystal core at first, but I really don't have that thing here. I wanted to replace it with purple crystal jade essence. Even though it's much more precious than purple crystal core, it's the least valuable thing in my treasury. But when it came to it, I realized that I still couldn't bear to give it to you, because it's a favor. Dukyu looked at that piece of purple crystal jade essence. His eyes were full of deep emotions. He slowly said, So I can only give you this piece of sun and moon ointment. I've really taken advantage of you. Xu Yang smiled bitterly. He felt dizzy and disoriented about this huge favor that had fallen from the sky. The tribulation sword was already rolling in excitement when the sun and moon ointment returned to his body. It can also be considered as repayment for the mysterious jade ice crystal and mysterious yang jade that you gave me. Dukyu smiled and said, "You're really good at doing business. The mysterious jade ice crystal and mysterious yang jade can't be compared to the sun and moon ointment in terms of value. But I have no use for the sun and moon ointment. And those two things are exactly what I need urgently but can't find." He laughed and said, "When a person is hungry, he can use 500 kilograms of gold to exchange for a steamed bun. It depends on the situation at that time. 500 kilograms of gold can't buy a life, but a steamed bun can save a life. This is the principle." He tilted his head and looked at Chu Yang. "Tell me, is it worth it to exchange a steamed bun for gold?" "It's worth it." Chu Yang smiled calmly and said, "No matter what, I've taken advantage of you today. Except for the purple crystal jade essence. The other 4 things in this treasury are all my family's property. They've existed since I was born." Dukyu laughed. "It can be considered as a gift from my ancestors. Now that I've given it to someone, I don't know if those dead people will crawl out of their graves to settle accounts with me." He took down the sun and moon ointment as he said this, and handed it to Chu Yang. He was really free and easy. He didn't even look reluctant to part with it. It was as if he had thrown out a piece of trash. Chu Yang also smiled and said, "Since that's the case, I really need it. I won't stand on ceremony." He kept the sun and moon ointment. The sun and moon ointment, as its name implied, was a kind of strange energy that was formed by the fusion of the essence of the sun and the moon in the sky. After countless years of condensation, the essence of the sun and the moon converged in one place. It was as soft as cotton and as light as nothing. This kind of thing was especially useful for sabers and swords. Any saber or sword, as long as a little of it was smeared on it, it would be nourished by the blood and slowly develop spiritual intelligence. Although this was a long process, it was a peerless function that nothing else could replace. What was the difference between a weapon that had its own spiritual intelligence and an ordinary divine weapon? It couldn't even be compared. Moreover, the weapon that had been smeared with the sun and moon ointment would have the ability to remember. No matter how damaged the weapon was, it would automatically recover to its best state. And this was the function that the Calamity Sword lacked. As long as the sun and moon ointment was melted into the Calamity Sword, then the divine weapons that the Calamity Sword created in the future would also have this ability. Indestructible. The returning Dantian sword spirit took a deep breath and muttered, "It seems that the world has changed. The previous masters of the Calamity Sword didn't get such a good thing. But all the good things in this generation have automatically returned to the Calamity Sword. I've fulfilled my promise to you, and it seems that you're very satisfied with it." Dukyu smiled and said, "Now, it's time for the bet. Heavenly Orchid, Heavenly Orchid, Heavenly Orchid, Heavenly Orchid," Xieling crazily shouted in his mind. "Well, there's one more thing." Chu Yang took a deep breath and felt the urging of the sword spirit in his mind. Then he probed, "Your Heavenly Orchid is of great use to me. I don't know if brother you, can you use it?" Chu Yang thought for a long time, and several ideas spun in his mind. Then he finally decided to go straight to the point and directly state his purpose. After all, he would be the one to suffer losses if he played with Dukyu. "Heavenly Orchid." Dukyu suddenly turned around and looked at Chu Yang's face with his sharp eyes. "You want the Heavenly Orchid?" "Yes." Chu Yang looked straight at him and nodded without hesitation. "Since you know about the Heavenly Orchid, then you should also know that this Heavenly Orchid is only 10,000 years old." Dukyu looked at him in a scrutinizing manner. "And a 10,000-year-old Heavenly Orchid is an extremely toxic poison. It doesn't have the least bit of use. So what do you want it for?" "As for what I want it for, I can't tell you," Chu Yang calmly said. "But I do want it. And it's of great use." Dukyu sneered and said, "I promised you the purple crystal core, but I gave you the sun and moon ointment. You gave me the yin and yang jades, but I gave you an entire white crystal mine. King of Hell Chu, I don't owe you anything. So why should I give you the Heavenly Orchid? But I don't know what you want. I can exchange it with you if I can." Chu Yang said carefully. Huh? What do I want? Duke Yu suddenly burst into mournful laughter. His laughter reverberated in this sealed space for a long time. Then, he looked at Chu Yang with his cold eyes and said, I've told you so much. Do you know my origin? Do you know the origin of this icy peak? Do you know the origin of the Ni? Heavenly Orchid? I don't know. You don't know anything. But you want the Heavenly Orchid from me? Duke Yu laughed. The ignorant are fearless. I dare to ask for it because I don't know. Chu Yang insipidly said. I'm afraid that I wouldn't even have the courage to open my mouth if I knew these things that you've said. Brother Yu, your laughter is too loud. It's making my ears feel uncomfortable. Duke Yu's eyes flashed. He snorted. He naturally understood what Chu Yang meant by, your laughter is too loud. It's making my ears feel uncomfortable. 10,000 years ago, there was a peerless genius who integrated the heavenly layer. But he exterminated 5 races of the clan. Duke Yu's eyes flashed with a mysterious light. He said, this icy peak is the only heritage left behind by a certain race of the clan 10,000 years ago. In order to prevent the extinction of their bloodline, they exhausted the strength of the entire clan to preserve this heritage. The treasures inside this place are the remnants of the clan from 10,000 years ago. This heavenly orchid is a young plant from 10,000 years ago. He said heavily. And this Duke 10,000 years ago was just an embryo in this space. I didn't have the help of any of my clansmen. I only relied on the strength of this heritage. And it took me 10,000 years to become a reincarnated human. There are 2 things. The first is to ask for monthly votes. I will continue to write. The fourth is Chapter 507. Duke Yu sneered. Would you exchange this heavenly orchid for something if you were me? *** Baidu Search Network High Quality Update *** No. Chu Yang sighed. Sword Spirit also sighed in his mind. How could there be any hope if Duke Yu had said so? Duke Yu took a few steps forward and arrived at the passage. He looked at the heavenly orchid for a long time. His eyes were full of reluctance. Then he slowly said, This thing is precious, and it's the only living witness I have. But I can give it to you if you promise me one thing. What is it? Chu Yang's heart trembled. What is your identity? Duke Yu suddenly turned his head and looked at Chu Yang. Then he asked without rhyme or reason. Huh? Are you? Duke Yu approached him step by step. Brother Yu? Are you? Are you? Are you? Are you? Duke Yu said are you a dozen times in a row. The look in his eyes became even more ferocious. But he suddenly exposed a trace of contradiction and pain. Then he finally stopped and said, Do you have a strange storage space? Chu Yang turned pale with fright when he asked this question. But Chu Yang was even more surprised when he didn't ask this question. Duke Yu didn't ask this question clearly, but Chu Yang knew what it was. Don't worry. I will keep your secret. Duke Yu's forehead was sweating. He lowered his head in disappointment and said, I started to suspect you the first time I saw you. I started to be certain when I was outside the prefectural city, so I deliberately left and let you do your own thing. Diwu Qing came to look for me 3 days before you arrived. Duke Yu gently smiled. But his smile was full of complexity. So I was half certain when I saw your cultivation when you came up. You plundered treasures and strange metals all the way here. So I was basically certain. Duke Yu clasped his hands behind his back and laughed mischievously. There was a hint of self-mockery in his laughter as he said, Therefore, I originally wanted to find 2 purple crystal cores for you. However, I changed my mind and gave you the sun and moon ointment instead. Now do you understand what I mean? Duke Yu tilted his head and looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang took a deep breath. He felt that his thoughts were somewhat flustered, but he forced himself to calm down. Then he said in a low and deep voice, Duke Yu is indeed worthy of being called Duke Yu. Don't worry. No one in this world can link you to these clues apart from me and the big ruling clans of the upper 3 heavens. As for the hegemon clans, you don't have to worry about them for now. Even Diwu Qing, who was in direct contact with you, only had a little guess. In fact, his chances of success are no more than 10 to 20%. That's why Diwu Qing placed such a huge bet on you. He didn't hesitate to overthrow himself in order to fulfill your wish. Duke, you snorted. 10 to 20%. And he dares to be so crazy. Chu Yang was a little puzzled. Haha. A 10 to 20% chance of success is already beyond our expectations. Diwu Qingro would risk everything to fight for this 1,000th chance, even if it's only 1,000th chance. Duke, you chuckled. Diwu Qingro wouldn't leak your information. On the contrary, you're a rare commodity to him. He wouldn't even have enough time to hide it, because he has placed the hope of the Diwu clan on you. You're finished, and so is the Diwu clan. There's such a thing. Chu Yang was really at a loss. Where did this come from? Duke, you smiled coldly. Take me for example. I really want to kill you, because you're the master of that thing's inheritance after all. But I can't kill you. Moreover, I have to protect you. In fact, I have to give you whatever you want. So, you have to promise me one thing. What is it? Chu Yang asked. Duke, you had already mentioned this condition twice in a row. I only want you to promise me now. I'll mention it when the time is right. Duke, you said. You don't know whether you can do it or not now. I also don't know whether you can do it or not. But, I have to remind you that you'll be in a very difficult position if that day comes. Duke, you sighed and said. So you need to consider it carefully now. Chu Yang felt dizzy. You don't say anything. You want me to promise you. And then you want me to consider it carefully. What kind of statement is this? How can I consider it if you don't tell me anything? Can I consider it with my ass? Promise him. Promise him. Promise him, ah. Sword Spirit madly bared his fangs and brandished his claws in Chu Yang's mind. He was jumping up and down. His remnant soul was so excited that his face turned red. Chu Yang lowered his head. He seriously and deeply considered it. It must be a very important thing for Duke to say this. Moreover, I'll be in a very difficult position. Why am I in a very difficult position? Even now, the friendship between us is very close. Duke had helped me in Great Zhao and the Three Heavens, and he had also promised to be my brother's sparring partner. I would have fulfilled any condition that Duke had put forward, even if he hadn't given me the heavenly orchid. But, he would rather use a priceless heavenly orchid in exchange for an illusory promise. Why? This shows that this matter is related to the principles of the Tribulation Sword Master. Chu Yang finally raised his head. He said with difficulty, I'm sorry, brother Yu. I refuse. Sword Spirit screamed in Chu Yang's mind. He fell to the ground. His face was covered in tears as he cursed. Great Sword Master, you're a cheap pig. A cheap pig. Motherfucker. You rushed to ask for it when he didn't want to give it to you. But you pushed him away when he gave it to you with both hands. You're cheap. Why are you so cheap? My heavenly orchid. Boo-hoo. My divine soul is forever fixed. Boo-hoo. My cheap pig. Lord ah. A disappointed look appeared on Duke Yu's face. But he nodded with gratification. You didn't agree. In fact, I was sure that you wouldn't agree. I wasn't wrong about you. He looked up to the sky and heaved a long sigh. His expression was full of loneliness and pain. Chu Yang's body suddenly relaxed after he had refused. He didn't have any more thoughts or burdens. So he said, Brother Yu, I've disturbed you for a long time. Shouldn't we go out? Yes, and that white crystal ore. Sigh. Duke Yu looked at Chu Yang with an unknown expression. Then, he forced a smile and said, I want to kill you right now. But I don't dare to do so. That's because I don't have much time left. I'll disappear as soon as I've lived for 100,000 years. I'll disappear from this world. I can only do this even if you don't agree. He sighed and said, I don't expect you to agree to my conditions. I'll give you this heavenly orchid. It should grow better with you than with me. Remember, you owe me a favor. Favor? How? Chu Yang asked vigilantly. A favor means that you'll help me if you feel that you can fulfill my wish. But, I don't need you to force yourself if you can't. Duke Yu took a deep breath. His eyes emitted a dazzling cold light. You mustn't refuse. I only have this little bit of hope left, and I'm still pinning it on your conscience. If you refuse, I really won't be able to stop myself from killing you. Don't forget that you've personally asked for this thing. So, if you don't want it now, Duke Yu angrily said, Even that man from 10,000 years ago wasn't as untrustworthy as you. Fuck me. Chu Yang forced a smile. He suddenly regretted that he had been blinded by lard. And he had listened to Sword Spirit's instigation to ask for this heavenly orchid. This is great. Duke, you didn't give it to me when I asked for it. But, Duke, you forced it on me when I didn't want it. And I can't refuse it. Chu Yang saw Dukyu's ashen complexion. It seemed that he would fly into a rage out of humiliation if he didn't give this heavenly orchid to Chu Yang today. But, what will I do if he asks me for help in the future if I accept it? Can I go against my conscience and say no? Chu Yang looked at this heavenly orchid as if he was looking at a hot potato. He didn't have the slightest hint of a peerless treasure anymore. The sword spirit in Chu Yang's mind seemed to have realized that he had stirred up trouble. So he lowered his head, even though he was still drooling greedily. In fact, he looked a little embarrassed. Sir Sword Master has become like this because of me. Cough cough. I feel guilty. Sword Spirit secretly shot a glance at the heavenly orchid from the corner of his eye. Then he swallowed a mouthful of saliva. It's a good thing. Do you want it or not? Do you want it or not? Dukyu angrily said, Give me a straight answer. You can take it if you want it. But, I will kill you if you don't want it. Isn't this a good choice? Isn't this a good choice? Chu Yang wanted to cry. Did you fucking setting sail watermark give me a choice? What kind of choice is this? Dukyu is forcing a good girl to become a prostitute in order to give away this wonderful treasure. An ominous glint flickered in his eyes. His entire body was seething with murderous aura. He was about to lose control. Minister Chu was dumbfounded. I was the only honored guest a moment ago. But I have become a lamb in the tiger's mouth at this moment. Even my wife won't let me enter this place. But his face immediately changed after I entered this place, and was warmly entertained. What can I do? Minister Chu was helpless. He pinched his nose and reluctantly said, Well, I'll accept it. Young Master Chu wanted to cry as soon as he said this. How can I be so depressed after receiving someone else's treasure? What's going on here? It's obvious that I've been longing for that heavenly orchid. But why does it seem like a virgin girl has been sold to a brothel and has no choice but to accept a customer under the torture of the procuress? That's my good brother. Dukyu's anger suddenly turned into joy. He heavily patted Chu Yang's shoulder. Then he rubbed his hands and said somewhat impatiently, Do you want to pull it out yourself? Or, do you want me to pull it out for you? It's better to cut the Gordian knot with a quick knife. The sooner you take it in, the sooner I'll feel relieved. You feel relieved. But I'm starting to feel worried, Chu Yang said in a plaintive manner. He felt extremely wronged in his heart. You're so boring. I've obviously given you a peerless treasure that can't be found anywhere in the world. But you feel wronged like this. This is a very strange thing. Dukyu had finally received a big favor from Chu Yang. So he was very happy. In fact, he even started to joke around. Chapter 508. King of Hell Chu furiously said to the sword spirit in his mind, Look at the trouble you've caused. Why aren't you taking it? The sword spirit hastily replied in high spirits. He then eagerly started to take action. The heavenly orchid disappeared from the passage with a schwa sound under Dukyu's dumbstruck gaze. You must be more spirited and obedient when I call you to do something in the future. I will tear the heavenly orchid apart if you give me trouble again. Chu Yang fiercely threatened him in his mind. The sword spirit fondly fiddled with the heavenly orchid while nodding repeatedly. This was the first time he had been so obedient since he had entered Chu Yang's mind. Let's go. I will take you to the white crystal mine. Dukyu looked at Chu Yang with envy. He then started to walk outside. He suddenly stopped after walking for a while. He muttered to himself for a long time. Then he turned around. Chu Yang, you owe me a favor today. This is equivalent to the biggest favor I will owe you in the future. Dukyu frowned. He didn't know where to start. So he said with difficulty, I want to remind you of something. Brother, you please speak. Chu Yang inexplicably felt his heart become heavy. He realized that the matter Dukyu was talking about was no trivial matter. You have the Calamity Sword in your body. As the master of the Calamity Sword, You have the calamity space in your body. This is a supreme magic weapon. It is also the #1 weapon in the heavenly layer. Once you master the calamity sword, you will be able to command the entire world. No one will dare to disobey you. Duke Yu finally said the words calamity sword, but he still seemed somewhat unsatisfied. Chu Yang's entire body shook. He knew that Duke Yu knew his identity, but he had said it out loud, and it had come from someone else's mouth. Chu Yang still felt shocked. But this thing is also... Duke Yu's lips squirmed. Then he finally said, "It's not a good thing. There should be a corresponding thing. I can't say for sure. It is only mentioned in vague records." Vague records? Chu Yang frowned and asked. When the calamity comes, the wind and clouds dance. When the calamity is destroyed, the stars cry. When the world changes, the destiny. Duke Yu recited in a deep voice. This is the calamity sword's calamity sword. This was a song about the calamity sword in the continent. There were a total of 10 lines, and there was only one line here. The last few lines are: the body is the calamity, the soul is the road, save the fall of the heavens, there is eternity. Venerate as a god, don't be the master, bones and flesh are destroyed. Duke Yu read until here and stopped abruptly. I also only know the last 7 sentences. After that it's broken. Chu Yang muttered to himself. The first sentence was about the calamity sword's function, but the second sentence was clearly about the calamity sword's master. The body is a calamity, the soul is the path. The heavens are overturned, the ages are eternal. Venerate as a god, don't be the master. Destroy flesh and bone. These words were a little creepy. Anyway, be careful. Duke Yu smiled faintly. Since I've given you such supreme authority as calamity sword and master, it would be abnormal if you didn't pay the corresponding price. Chu Yang laughed and said, that's right. Then, he put this matter aside, and the two walked out side by side. Outside, Mo Qing Wu's entire body was wrapped in a thick marten fur coat. She would stretch her neck from time to look at the snow-filled area in front of her. She had an anxious look on her face. She only saw Chu Yang and Duke Yu walking to that place, and then they disappeared in a flash. Why hasn't Brother Chu Yang come out yet? Mo Qing Wu muttered to herself anxiously. Today the little girl was wearing a snow-white raccoon hat, a thick white raccoon fur scarf, and a snow-white raccoon fur coat. But on her feet, she wore a pair of exquisite red fox leather boots. Little Wu's face was snow-white, her eyebrows were delicate, and her eyes were dark. In this vast expanse of white snow, she looked extremely cute. The only thing that was lacking in beauty was that she was wearing too much. Chu Yang wrapped this little girl from the inside out with a few layers of cotton-padded jacket, cotton-padded trousers, cotton-padded waistcoat, and leather waistcoat. This directly caused the originally slender and even thin little girl to look like a penguin in the snow, or a little bear in the snow. She looked extremely bloated. She swayed from side to side as she walked, like a little bear carefully moving in the snow. But she looked even more adorable and cute. Brother Chu Yang has something to do inside. GMO coaxed his little cousin. Come, little Wu, kiss Brother Jimo's face, and I'll tell you what he has to do. Humph. Mo Qing Wu rolled her eyes and said, you and Brother Jiju are the same. Both of your faces are stinky. GMO was instantly anxious. Don't compare that guy to me. I'm fragrant. If you don't believe me, kiss me. I don't kiss other men. Mo Qing Wu pouted. I haven't even kissed second brother. As she said that, she rolled her eyes at GMO implying, let alone you? GMO retreated in defeat. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang pushed him aside and scolded. What's the point of bullying a little girl? Move aside. GMO retreated unhappily and walked to the front of the group with Luo Kadi, blocking the wind. The two of them winked at each other for a while, and GMO suddenly asked, has it grown? Luo Kadi's face turned red, and he shouted, get lost. It hasn't grown? GMO exclaimed. Then he shrugged his shoulders and chuckled. He said, mine is very luxuriant. Luo Kadi was speechless, and his eyes widened as if he wanted to eat someone. This topic started when these two lazy guys unintentionally took a bath together again, and young Master GMO discovered Luo Kadi's abnormality. Therefore, Luo Kadi suffered a tragedy, because second young Master Ji would mention this matter whenever he was with him. And second young Master Luo also felt extremely inferior. GMO didn't let him off, and his eyes widened as he exclaimed, I heard that Azure Dragon is gifted. This matter, tisk tsk tsk, little wolf, looks like you'll be very powerful. Luo Kadi's face immediately turned red, and he shouted angrily as he grabbed GMO's collar, gnashing his teeth. Do you want to be beaten? GMO hurriedly raised his hand. Spare me, spare me. I heard that hairless ones are the scariest. Ow dog ant. Wahahaha. Luo Kadi couldn't bear it anymore, and he clenched his fist and smashed it down. The two of them immediately rolled on the snowy ground and started to fight. GMO was beating him while laughing so hard that he couldn't breathe. He was being beaten by Luo Kadi, but he still couldn't help but laugh. Luo Kadi was crazily beating this guy when he suddenly raised his head and exclaimed in surprise. Then he stopped moving. GMO also got up and followed Luo Kadi's gaze. He also exclaimed in surprise and stopped moving. He saw a graceful white figure leisurely coming from the wind and snow in front of him. It was a woman. She was wearing a snow-white dress, and her hair was tied up high. She floated over, and it was a pleasure to see such a scene in the wind and snow, especially this woman's gentle face, and her eyes were looking left and right as she came, as if she was looking for something. Luo Kadi was dumbstruck, and he nudged GMO. Look, a beauty. GMO's eyes lit up, and he repeatedly nodded. She's fucking beautiful. She's very charming, and her steps are like lotuses. Luo Kadi shook his head. It's as if she's wearing magnificent clothes to patrol the sky, and wearing silk clothes to walk in the night. GMO turned his head in a circle. The two of them were somewhat lustful at this moment, and then they did something that they would regret for the rest of their lives. Owa, owa. Luo Kadi loudly howled, and put his fingers in his mouth and whistled. It was sharp and loud. Owa, dog ant. GMO jumped up and down, and put his fingers in his mouth at the same time. Then, a whistle that was even sharper than Luo Kadi's whistle sounded. The woman in white heard the whistle from afar, and was about to walk towards the icy peak. However, she changed her direction, and walked towards the two of them. Her feet didn't touch the ground, and she gracefully walked over like a lotus in the wind. GMO and Luo Kadi didn't wait for her to approach, and jumped out with a puff sound. The two of them exposed lecherous smiles as they went forward to greet her. Owa, elder sister, you're very beautiful. Luo Kadi turned his head in a circle, and was entranced by her beauty. Yes, yes, you're very beautiful. GMO hurriedly went forward, and was afraid that Luo Kadi would steal the limelight. Really? The woman indifferently looked at the two of them, and her eyes were dull. Really? Really? Luo Kadi laughed out loud. When I saw you, I wanted to write a poem. Let's praise you, you're too beautiful. Elder sister, what's your surname? Yes. GMO used his shoulder to carry Luo Kadi to one side, and rushed to flatter her. Elder sister, you're very beautiful. May I ask what's your name? When I saw you, I wanted to write a poem. You wrote a poem? You wrote a poem? The woman in white pointed at GMO, and then pointed at Luo Kadi, and looked somewhat curious. Of course, Luo Kadi proudly said. My talent isn't just for show. Back then, I wrote a poem for my confinement nanny. GMO repeatedly nodded. Yes, my poetic talent is matchless. This is known to all. This beautiful elder sister, which family are you from? How come I've never seen you before? What's your name? Humph. The woman in white suddenly laughed strangely, and said with a murderous aura, My name is Jun Shiju. Have you heard of me? Second young Master Luo Kadi? Second young Master GMO? GMO and Luo Kadi let out a strange cry at the same time. Their scalps felt numb, and their bodies felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Luo Kadi's eyes turned red, and he was about to cry. My God, how did I tease this god of death by teasing a beauty? This is really, an old man is hanging himself. He has lived too long. Jun Shiju was the overlord of the dark bamboo. She usually wore a black robe, and a black veil over her face. Basically, no one had seen her true appearance for 3 days. Even some old monsters knew about it, but no one dared to say it. How many days had it been since GMO and Luo Kadi had wandered the Jianghu? They had only seen Jun Shizhu once or twice. They had seen her from afar, and had quickly turned their gazes away. They had only seen her black robe, and had felt cold all over. So, how could they know Jun Shizhu's true appearance? Moreover, these two were used to being casual. So they wanted to flirt with this beauty whenever they saw her. They would only tease her every time, and then provoke her to get angry. Then they would scream, and turn around to run away. They would then laugh heartily, and be incomparably happy. However, these two evil young men had flirted with a lot of young ladies of the three heavens. I didn't expect that I would run into a ghost this time around. They had flirted with the biggest and most terrifying underworld overlord of the three heavens. Chapter 509. Jun Shizhu was also extremely depressed about encountering such a matter. She had changed out of her black clothes since she had arrived in the northern wilderness. She had gotten tired of wearing them. She had changed into new clothes, and had dressed up in her favorite plain clothes. She had then appeared in front of her few trusted subordinates. Duke Yu had gone out today, and hadn't returned yet. Jun Shizhu was somewhat worried. Moreover, she had just received the news that the clan that had a grudge against Duke Yu had also sent people to hunt for spirit beasts in the northern wilderness. Jun Shizhu was afraid that Duke Yu might be in trouble, and the other subordinates under her obviously weren't of any use. Therefore, she had to personally come out to look for him. She was the only one in the entire Dark Bamboo organization who could help in case something happened to Duke Yu. She had come out to look for Duke Yu. So her first stop was naturally Duke Yu's lair. She knew that Duke Yu's main purpose for coming back this time was this place. Moreover, she was also very curious about Duke Yu's secret lair. No one had ever set foot in it. Therefore, Jun Shizhu had come all the way here for many reasons. Who would have thought that she would run into two little hoodlums teasing her as soon as she arrived at Duke Yu's lair? This had made Jun Shizhu angry and amused at the same time. Especially that whistle. It sounded one after another as if it was urging them to die. And it did not stop. Jun Shizhu became angry in her heart. She wanted to teach them a lesson. But she came over to take a look, and found that they were acquaintances. They were the husbands of the two big clans of the three heavens. Jun Shizhu had wanted to scare them off with a glare. But she hadn't even gotten the time to open her mouth when these two well-known mischievous guys had begun to blow their own trumpet. They had even started to flirt with each other. They are writing chapters and poems. Jun Shizhu gloomily looked at the two of them. Luo Kadi, do you know how to write chapters? GMO, do you know how to write poems? Luo Kadi and GMO trembled in an instant. Luo Kadi wiped his sweat. His head was steaming hot in such a cold weather. He cut a sorry figure. June, 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 forgive me. Cough, cough, cough. We were also. Hee, just joking, joking. Luo Kadi wiped his sweat under Jun Shizhu's increasingly cold gaze. The more he spoke, the more powerless he became. In the end, he couldn't continue. Don't be angry, monarch. Hee. Don't be angry, monarch. Don't be angry. This. GMO rolled his eyes. Hee. Everyone loves beauty. This. What are you talking about? Jun Shizhu got angry in an instant. She flew over and lifted Luo Kadi up. Then, she punched second young Master Luo's lower abdomen with a puff sound. She then kicked second young Master Luo to the ground. Then she stepped on his chest and asked with a ferocious look on her face, "Have you seen Duke Yu?" Luo Kadi and GMO looked at each other. They immediately felt relieved. Yes. Where? He's inside. He hasn't come out yet. We're waiting for him here. The two of them rushed to answer. This woman was too scary. Is it here? Jun Shizhu heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that nothing had happened. When he turned around and saw the two fellows, he was instantly enraged. Jun Shizhu wasn't in a hurry since Duke Yu was fine. So, she simply waited here for him to come out. She also wanted to teach these two fellows a lesson for taking liberties with women. She kicked second young Master Luo's body with a bang sound. He screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Luo Kadi, write a chapter for me. Hurry up. Don't you know how to write? You can even write a chapter for Aunt Guan. You're quite capable, you. Luo Kudi's face looked bitter. Minister Jun, this? Quickly write. Jun Shizhu angrily said. Someone else will write a chapter for second young Master Luo, if I don't see a complete chapter today. Moreover, it will be a sacrifice. Luo Kudi was complaining in his heart. His chest had been stepped on, and it felt as if an entire mountain was pressing down on him. He couldn't even move his fingers. He helplessly rolled his eyes and called out for help. Third brother, help me write an article. GMO slowly turned around. He was preparing to run away, but he was fixed in place by Luo Kudi's words. He lifted his foot and got stuck in the air. This bastard. I'm about to escape. Aren't you pulling me down with you? I almost forgot. GMO, can you compose a poem? Jun Shizhu squinted at GMO. You have 3 steps to compose a poem. I will ask Luo Kudi to write a sacrifice for you if you can't do it. GMO screamed and jumped up. He then burst into tears and said, Luo Kudi, you bastard. I'm going to die because of you. Luo Kudi was lying on the ground. He rolled his eyes up and down. GMO, you go first. Jun Shizhu was so angry that she couldn't take it out on Luo Kudi. So the tip of her foot rubbed on Luo Kudi's chest. Luo Kudi's entire body trembled in an instant. Then he shouted, Third brother, quickly compose a poem. GMO spread out his hands. He was so miserable that he wanted to cry. I wouldn't have written a poem if I could compose a poem, right? Quickly write. Jun Shizhu's complexion changed. The coldness in her eyes became even denser. Are you taking liberties with me? Do you think I'm so easy to take liberties with? GMO burst into tears. We didn't know that it was you. Cut the crap. Jun Shizhu's murderous aura burst out. I'll compose a poem. GMO stood stiffly. He frowned and racked his brains. It's snowing heavily in the sky, and fluttering. He unconsciously took a step forward, and recited the second sentence. The moon's great mountain whitens my waist. PFFF. Luo Kudi's body trembled as he heard these 2 sentences. His face also turned red. It was rare for him to laugh, even though he was being stepped on like this. You're still laughing? Jun Shizhu looked at him in astonishment. Second young Master Luo. You're very courageous. You're not afraid of death. Ah. Luo Kudi's eyes turned white. I can't help it. How can this be called a fucking poem? Second Master G finally stuttered and recited the 3rd sentence at this time. To compose a poem in such a cold weather. He scratched his ears and cheeks, and thought for a long time. Then he said, It's not bad. He then jumped up and down. Wahaha, finished. It's snowing heavily in the sky, and the moon's great mountain whitens my waist. To compose a poem in such a cold weather, isn't it bad? Jun Shizhu twisted her slender eyebrows. What kind of bullshit is this? You only said that you want to compose a poem. You didn't say anything about the standard. GMO straightened his neck and argued with reason. He couldn't not argue. After all, he would die if Jun Shizhu insisted that he compose another poem. This poem is the most rhyming poem I've ever composed since I was born. Fine. Jun Shizhu waved her hand. Get lost. I'll make your G-clan prepare for a funeral if I see you taking liberties with a woman again. GMO nodded and bowed. Yes. But I'm already taken. Abwa is very good. I won't do it again. The key point is that Luo Kudi is a rogue. He covered his head and fled like a rat. It was, panicked like a stray dog, and busy like a fish escaping the net. GMO. You pig. Luo Kudi miserably lay on the ground and cursed loudly. He pounded the ground with his hands. He was extremely indignant. It's your turn. Jun Shizhu looked at Luo Kudi and spoke in a cold voice. Let me see your talent. Luo Kudi was so distressed that he wanted to die. Minister Jun, why don't you beat me up? Cut the crap. A cold light flashed, and a long sword was inserted into Luo Kudi's crotch with a schwa sound. It penetrated his clothes, and plunged into the snow below him. The sword's body swayed, and emitted a cold light. Ice cold. Luo Kudi's entire body shivered, and his hair stood on end. He could feel that the sword was slowly swaying in contact with his crotch, and his soul had flown out of his body. He suddenly felt that the watermark of setting sail was rushing to the front and back of his body. Spare my life. Second young master Luo shivered. Your Luo clan will have to rely on your elder brother Luo Kuwu to carry on your ancestral line if you don't write a poem. Jun Shiju insipidly said. All right, Luo Kudi readily agreed. Then he frowned and pondered. Title: Praise the Great Snow. Luo Kudi gasped for breath. Can you let me stand up? No. No. Praise the Great Snow. Praise the Great Snow. Luo Kudi's face was sullen. It seemed as if he had lost his parents. Luo Kudi obviously wanted to learn from Jimo's praise of the Great Snow. In the cold winter, heavy snow swirls in the air. Snowflakes fall fiercely, and the north wind blows fiercely. The weather is cold, and the ground is frozen. It's infinitely sad. Second young master Luo's talent was really good. Is the cold winter in your clan during the moon? Jun Shiju snorted. It's the moon now. It's so cold here. Isn't it the cold winter? Luo Kudi rolled his eyes and mumbled. I'm still naked in my clan at this time. Cut the crap. Continue. The weather is cold, and the ground is frozen. It's infinitely sad. The most miserable person is none other than me. GMO is gone. That bad embryo. One day, he'll pull out my tendons and smash my marrow. Second young master Luo's speech became more and more fluent. He rolled his eyes. Among all the women in the world, the most beautiful confinement matron. She's devastatingly beautiful. She's capable of causing the downfall of a nation. She's scared away at first sight. Unfortunately, she's married. She sighs. The white snow poured into her mouth along with the wind. Second young master Luo got emotional because of the scenery. So he returned to the original topic. It's cold and piercing to the bone. It's not beautiful. I'm in the northern ice field. I'm in bad luck. I'll never go back if I can. Ha 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 ha. Pfft. Jun Shiju was amused by him and laughed. She then kicked this guy and scolded him with a smile. Get lost. I'll kill you if I see you taking liberties with women again. Hey. Luo Kudi crawled up. He didn't look back and fled like a rat. His heart was thumping wildly. I finally escaped with my life. My mother. It was too close. Who would have thought that my setting sail mother would have experienced such a terrifying thing? That ice-cold sword was stuck to that part of my body. My brother would have run away from home if I hadn't been careful. How could I have ignored my second brother? He thought about it and thought about it. He was so scared that his lips had turned blue, and his face had turned white. But then, he suddenly burst into laughter. Ignored my second brother? Gulao Air? I'm really talented. What did you say? Gu Du Xing appeared in front of him with a murderous look on his face. He happened to hear Luo Kudi's muttering. Luo Kudi's legs went soft. His mind was still in chaos. So he spoke without thinking. I was talking about my second brother. I can't ignore. Second brother Gu. I'll beat you to death, you bastard. Gu Du Xing and Dong Wushang had been called over by GMO as reinforcements. They had rushed here with anxious hearts. But they had seen this guy jumping around and mocking them. They had gotten angry when they heard these words. So they had started to rain punches and kicks on him in a crazy manner. Luo Kudi was lying on the ground like a dried salted fish in less than a quarter of an hour. He was only exhaling, and no longer breathing. A white light flashed at this time, and a big door suddenly appeared. Chu Yang and Duke Yu had finally walked out. Second update. I'm going out to practice driving. I'll take the road test tomorrow morning. It's the 10th time. I'll lose face if I don't take it. Cough cough, I'll lose face already. I'll have nothing to do this month after tomorrow's test. Even if I have to take the makeup test, it'll be next month. Ugh, I'm such a jinx. Chapter 510. What's the matter? Why is it so messy? Duke Yu frowned. He was very displeased. This is a secluded place for cultivation. How did it turn into a slaughterhouse? Then, he turned his head to look at Jun Shiju. Why are you here? Someone from that family has come down. Jun Shiju coldly snorted. Chu Yang hastily asked Shua Du Xing and the others while speaking. What's the matter? ***Baidu search network's high-quality update ***. It's your two sworn brothers. Jun Shiju replied. She coldly snorted and said, one is Luo Kudi, and the other is GMO. They are taking liberties with women. And they are taking liberties with me. This has never happened in the three heavens. Even Dukyu's body swayed twice in an instant. As for Shuo Duxing and Dong Wushang, they were even more dizzy. They almost sat down on the snow-covered ground. They had been scared by this sentence. No wonder GMO had patted his buttocks and shouted for help after he had returned. Then he had said that something bad had happened, and that Luo Kudi was going to be slaughtered. But he hadn't said anything. It's no wonder that they have taken liberties with women. They have become the overlords of the underworld of the three heavens. These two brothers are really... Shuo Duxing sighed. I understand. I wouldn't have said anything if it had been me. This isn't shameful anymore. Luo Kudi and GMO lowered their heads. It seemed as if they had committed a great crime of deceiving the monarch. Their faces had turned into persimmons at this moment. One could see that Jun Shiju hadn't wrongly accused them, just by looking at their appearance. Really? Dukyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and sighed. Heroes come from the youth since ancient times. I admire you. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not being sarcastic. I truly admire you. At least, you've done something that I wouldn't have dared to do. Luo Kudi and Jimo's noses became crooked. Idols. Chu Yang grabbed their hands with tears in his eyes. You two have created an unprecedented precedent in the three heavens. Big brother. We please don't say it. I feel like dying. Luo Kudi's face was bitter as he repeatedly pleaded. One said that he could compose a poem, and the other said that he could write a chapter. You guys are really treating me like a little girl to coax. Jun Shiju rolled her eyes. Everyone felt as if they had been struck by lightning. One after another, they asked Second Young Master Luo and Second Young Master Ji what kind of poem they had written. The two of them directly stuck their heads into the crotch of their trousers, refusing to raise their heads no matter what. Go ahead and mock us all you want. We don't believe that you won't embarrass us in the future. Jun Shiju restrained herself from laughing. She then read out the poem. Everyone has a big belly. Du Xing and Dong Wushang were taking joy in other people's misfortune. In fact, they were laughing so hard that tears were almost flowing out of their eyes. Next, Dukyu continued to bring Chu Yang to complete the bet. Jun Shiju fished out a small booklet from her bosom and handed it over to Imo Qing Wu. This was what she wrote during this period of time. It was also one of the reasons why she came out this time besides looking for Dukyu. Then Jun Shiju stood still. She stretched out her hand and pointed her finger at Luo Kudi. Then she pointed at GMO. Then she nodded again and exposed a meaningful smile. Then she rose up and disappeared in the snowflakes that filled the sky. Luo Kudi and GMO sat down on the snow-covered ground as soon as she left. They couldn't help but wipe their sweat. Then they kept muttering, "Hot, this weather is really hot." Everyone looked at the ice under their feet and the heavy snow in the sky. They were speechless. This is the White Crystal Mine. Dukyu pointed at the sparkling white light in front of him and said. The two of them had already passed through a deep and long tunnel at this moment. They were 1,000 feet below the ground. White crystals were everywhere as far as the eye could see. They were piled up in large chunks. Some of them were still on the mountain walls and hadn't been extracted yet. The more they went, the more they got. The Calamity sword in his dantian trembled excitedly and buzzed. Chu Yang was thoroughly stunned. He had thought that the white crystal mine that Dukyu had mentioned wasn't very big. In fact, it was only on such a small scale. Who would have thought that he would see a super-large mineral vein at this moment? Moreover, all the white crystals could be seen at a glance. In fact, it wouldn't take much effort to extract them all. If it was calculated according to the size of a palm, the white crystals here would be tens of thousands of pieces, hundreds of thousands of pieces, millions of pieces, or even tens of millions. Chu Yang sucked in a breath of cold air. Dukyu smiled. His smile was still as carefree as before. He said, "You can stay here. I understand. Yes, I'll go out first. Tell them that you'll be in seclusion here. Then, we'll wait outside for you to come out." "Many thanks," Chu Yang said gratefully. Dukyu smiled faintly and said, I'll also exchange pointers with them one by one. After all, I can't be a sparring partner for nothing. Haha, good. Dukyu smiled and turned to leave. Brother Yu, Chu Yang called out. Yes. Is there anything else? Dukyu turned to look at him. It's just a small token of appreciation. Please accept it, Brother Yu. Chu Yang held a piece of mysterious jade ice crystal core and a piece of mysterious yang jade core in his hand. This was a world of difference compared to the two pieces that Dukyu had shamelessly taken away from him that day. If you give me peaches and plums, I'll repay you with fine jade. Chu Yang was a person who never suffered losses. He clearly distinguished between gratitude and grudges. As long as you treat me with sincerity, I'll treat you 100 times better. Even if I can't give you the same value, I'll do my best. Just like how he treated Xie Danxiong that day in the Xie clan. And like how he treated Dukyu today. In the Xie clan, it was because of benefits in the beginning. But it was no longer for benefits when Chu Yang gave Xie Danxiong the real jade flowers. Xie Danxiong knew this better than anyone else. It was a matter of friendship. And it was the same today. The reason why Chu Yang gave away the mysterious jade ice crystal core and the mysterious yang jade core was because of Dukyu's friendship. Perhaps Dukyu had some ulterior motives in the end, but his help to Chu Yang at this stage was incomparable. Dukyu's eyes moved. He looked at Chu Yang deeply, but he didn't reach out his hand. Instead, he asked, "Why are you giving them to me?" He would rather go back on his word that day to take those two pieces. But he took a step back today, when these two pieces of jade core were 10,000 times better than the one in front of him. There's no reason. If people respect me, I'll respect them tenfold. Chu Yang said seriously, "Brother Yu, I only treated you as a mysterious expert when I made the bet with you and argued with you before. As for the bet and promise, that's for strangers." He looked at Dukyu seriously and said, "But I'm giving these two pieces of jade to you now, because of friends." Chu Yang smiled gently. "So, this has nothing to do with the future or the promise of friendship, or anything else. It's just a token of my sincerity." Dukyu didn't seem to hear what Chu Yang had said. He only frowned and looked deeply into Chu Yang's eyes. He said softly, friend. Something seemed to flash in the depths of his eyes. Then, he put the two pieces of jade away. Very cautiously, he placed them into his bosom. He smiled faintly and said, "Maybe you'll regret the word friend one day. If Brother Yu doesn't regret it, I won't regret it either." Chu Yang smiled and said, "I'm afraid that I'll regret it." Dukyu laughed. "Even if you regret it, that's your business." Chu Yang said quietly, "Even if I regret it, that's my business?" Dukyu murmured. He suddenly felt warm in his heart. "Even if you regret it, that's your business. What does it have to do with me? But I won't regret it. Even if we become enemies because of you in the future, I still won't regret what I've done today." These were the words that Chu Yang didn't finish speaking. Dukyu completely understood. Dukyu finally turned around and left without saying a word. His green robe fluttered, and he disappeared in front of Chu Yang in the blink of an eye. Chu Yang watched him leave, and a smile appeared on his face. Then he turned around and stretched out his right hand. The three pieces of the Calamity sword suddenly appeared at his fingertips. In the next moment, the Calamity sword pierced the white crystal wall in front of him. It was clean and tidy, without the slightest hesitation. Time was of the essence. Besides, Chu Yang couldn't wait any longer. The silver crystal in front of him dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a while, the Calamity sword flew up with a clang and began to advance forward like a hot knife through butter. Wherever it passed, the white crystal dimmed and turned into powder. 3 days later, the entire white crystal mine completely dimmed. The space inside became even bigger, and there was dust everywhere. The three pieces of the Calamity sword all emitted a bright light. A faintly discernible spiritual energy rippled at the tip of the sword and stopped in the air motionless. Suddenly, a strong light burst out, and then it immediately returned to its original state. Not long after, another wave of strong ghosts appeared. This cycle repeated. In a short time, it had already flashed more than 10 times. Finally, the Calamity sword returned to its original state, as if there were no changes at all. The sword spirit said thoughtfully, "Improve it in all aspects. With the sun and moon ointment, you don't have to hold anything back." Oh, Chu Yang's spirit was immediately lifted. First, he threw the sun and moon ointment out. With a swoosh, the calamity sword pierced the sun and moon ointment. In an instant, the sun and moon ointment was absorbed into powder. Then, Chu Yang took out the precious materials that he had originally collected one after another. In the end, he directly put the calamity sword into the calamity space and let it absorb it by itself. The sword spirit immediately became very nervous. 3 days later, the calamity sword finished absorbing the existing resources. Except for the dozens of pieces of materials that Chu Yang had left behind to forge weapons, and the mysterious jade ice crystal and mysterious yang jade that the sword spirit was desperately protecting, the calamity space was already empty. And the sword spirit had also ripened a petal of the heavenly orchid. His aura had suddenly weakened a lot, but a burst of black fog started to rise from his body after he took it. And this black fog started to condense inside the sword spirit's body. His entire body had become very condensed by the time this black fog had completely condensed inside his body. This visual effect was more than 10 times stronger than before he took it. "It's really worth it." The sword spirit sighed deeply. He looked at his arms and legs with satisfaction and proudly shook them a few times. "What do we do now?" the sword spirit asked. "Immediately heal Qing Wu's 3-yin meridian," Chu Yang said unquestionably. As he spoke, he hurriedly walked out. And then immediately let the calamity sword refine elixirs to increase the strength of my brothers," Chu Yang said without hesitation. "Their current strength is too weak." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.